She was standing at the counter of her own café at 6:45 in the morning, flower on her left sleeve and a ring on her finger that had not been there the night before, when her phone lit up with a message from her best friend that said simply, "I need details. All of them. Right now. Wishing you a day full of joy and good luck. Before we begin, let us know in the comments which city you are watching from. And at the end, don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10. Enjoy the story." Nora Callahan looked at the ring. Then she looked at her son, who was sitting at the corner table, eating a croissant, and reading a book about the structural history of suspension bridges, completely unbothered by the fact that his mother had just agreed to marry a man she had met 4 months ago at a restaurant where neither of them had a reservation. Then she looked at the ring again, and she thought, "This is not how I expected my life to go." But to understand how they got here, to understand why a woman who had spent 5 years building something entirely on her own said yes to a man who showed up with terrible gas station coffee and a small box and absolutely no prepared speech. You need to go back to a Friday night in October when Caleb Whitmore was turning 30. Six and the Universe had a very specific sense of humor. The city of Charleston, South Carolina, does something particular in October. The heat that has been pressing down on the streets since June finally lifts. And what replaces it is something almost embarrassingly beautiful. Cool air that smells like the harbor and wood smoke and the last of the jasmine. Golden light that turns every brick building on King Street into something from a painting. It is the kind of evening that makes people want to be outside, which is exactly why every restaurant in the historic district was packed to capacity on the night Caleb Whitmore decided, at 8:47 in the evening, that he deserved a decent meal. He had been in meetings since 7 that morning. 13 hours of conversations about server infrastructure, acquisition timelines, and a quarterly projection that his CFO kept describing as aggressively optimistic, which Caleb had learned was corporate language for, "We are hoping very hard." He had eaten half a granola bar at 2 in the afternoon and nothing else. He had missed 3 calls from his sister, one from his college roommate, and one from a number he did not recognize that turned out, based on the voicemail, to be a florist who had the wrong Whitmore. It was his birthday. He had not told anyone at the office. He had not planned anything. He had simply looked up from his desk at 8:30, realized the building was empty, and decided that the universe owed him a steak. Hartwell's had been open for exactly 6 weeks. It had received a review in the Post and Courier that used the phrase quietly revelatory 3 times in 4 paragraphs, which Caleb thought was excessive, but which had apparently convinced every person in Charleston to make a reservation simultaneously. The restaurant occupied the ground floor of a renovated warehouse on East Bay Street, its windows warm with amber light, the kind of light that promises good food and better conversation. There was a line of people waiting on the sidewalk outside, even though it was nearly 9 in the evening on a weekday. Caleb looked at the line. The line looked back at him with the collective indifference of people who had planned ahead. He went in anyway. The host stand was staffed by a young man named Marcus, who had the posture of someone who had been trained to be pleasant in the face of unreasonable requests and had been tested on this training many times tonight already. He had dark hair, a clipboard that he held with the quiet authority of a document that contained the secrets of the universe, and a smile that was professional in the way that offense is professional. It kept things on the correct side. "Good evening," Marcus said. "Welcome to Hartwell's. Do you have a reservation?" "I don't," Caleb said. He said it the way he said most things, with the calm confidence of a man who had spent 15 years in rooms where confidence was the only currency that mattered. "But it is just one person, one seat. I am flexible on location." Marcus looked at the clipboard. Then he looked at Caleb. Then he looked at the clipboard again. "I am afraid we're completely booked this evening, sir." Caleb looked past Marcus into the restaurant. It was a beautiful space, exposed brick, dark wood, an open kitchen behind a long counter where two chefs were moving with the focused efficiency of people who had done this 10,000 times. The counter had 10 stools. 8 of them were occupied. 2 were not. "What about the counter?" Caleb asked. "The counter seats are reserved as well." "Both of them?" "Yes, sir." Caleb studied the counter. One of the empty stools had a jacket draped over it. The other was next to a woman with dark hair pulled back in a way that suggested it had started the evening, in a more deliberate arrangement, and had since given up, and a boy of about 7 who was drawing something on the paper the restaurant provided for children and narrating his work aloud to no one in particular. The stool next to them was, as far as Caleb could tell, simply empty. "The one on the end," he said, "next to the woman and the boy." Marcus followed his gaze. "That seat is reserved," Caleb finished. "For whom? I am not at liberty to—" Marcus, Caleb kept his voice pleasant. He had learned a long time ago that pleasantness was more effective than volume. "It is my birthday. I have eaten half a granola bar today. I am not asking for anything unreasonable. I am asking for one seat at a counter in a restaurant that has, by my count, 2 empty seats." Marcus appeared to be conducting an internal debate of some complexity. "I can put you on the waiting list," he offered. "The estimated wait is approximately 2 hours and 50 minutes." Caleb stared at him. "2 hours and 50 minutes," he repeated. "It is an estimate, sir. It could be slightly longer." "You said slightly longer, not shorter. The shorter outcome is less likely." "Yes." Caleb took a breath. He had, in the past 14 years, negotiated contracts worth more than the GDP of several small nations. He had convinced a board of directors to approve a pivot that every analyst in the room thought was insane, and that had turned out to be the decision that made Whitmore Capital what it was today. He had once talked a venture partner out of a lawsuit using nothing but a whiteboard and 45 minutes. He was being defeated by a man with a clipboard who was, at most, 24 years old. "All right," Caleb said. "Thank you." He turned toward the door. And that was when he heard it. "Hey." The voice came from the counter. Not loud. It was not the kind of voice that needed to be loud to carry. It was the kind of voice that was simply used to being heard. Caleb turned. The woman at the counter was looking directly at him. She had dark eyes and the kind of face that was not conventionally beautiful in the way that required effort to maintain, but was instead interesting, the sort of face that looked like it had opinions and was not shy about them. There was, he noticed, a small amount of flour on her left sleeve that she had either not noticed or had decided was not worth addressing. She tilted her head toward the empty stool beside her. "It is empty," she said, "and you look like you are about to make a bad decision." Caleb looked at Marcus. Marcus looked at his clipboard with the focused attention of a man who had decided this was no longer his problem. "Sit down," the woman said, "before I change my mind." The boy beside her looked up from his drawing. He had the same dark eyes as his mother and the expression of someone conducting a rapid and thorough assessment. "He is tall," the boy said. "Owen," the woman said, "I am just noting it. Tall people need more food. It is science." Caleb walked to the counter and sat down. The stool was comfortable. The counter was warm wood, worn smooth in the way that good things get worn. Not damaged, just used. In front of him, through the pass-through window, he could see the kitchen in full motion. A chef calling out orders, 2 line cooks moving in the synchronized rhythm of people who had learned to share a small space without collision. The smell was extraordinary, something with brown butter and fresh herbs, and the particular sweetness of caramelized onion that made his empty stomach make its opinion known. "I am Nora," the woman said, not looking up from the menu she was reviewing. "That is Owen. He is 7. He'll ask you question. Answer honestly. He can tell when people are lying. I can always tell, Owen confirmed, still drawing. It is a gift. I am Caleb, Caleb said. What do you do, Caleb? Owen asked. Business? Owen looked up. What kind of business? Technology, infrastructure. Owen considered this. Do you know what a cantilever is? Caleb paused. He had a vague memory of the word from a conversation about a bridge project his firm had briefly considered investing in. It is a structural element that extends horizontally beyond its support point, he said, used in bridges and some buildings. Owen stared at him for a long moment with the intensity of a professor evaluating a thesis defense. Acceptable, Owen said, and returned to his drawing. Nora glanced sideways at Caleb. You just passed the first test. There are multiple tests? There are always multiple tests. The server appeared, a young woman who looked at the new arrangement at the counter with the brief professional adjustment of someone who had seen stranger things on a Friday night. Can I get you started with something to drink? Water, Caleb said. Nora turned to look at him fully, for the first time. She had the expression of someone who had just heard something mildly offensive. It is your birthday, and you are ordering water. Caleb looked at her. How do you know it is my birthday? I heard you tell Marcus. The whole counter heard you tell Marcus. You weren't quiet about it. I drove here. Fair, Nora said. Still sad. She turned back to the server. He'll have the house sparkling water and whatever you recommend for a birthday. Something with bubbles that isn't alcohol. The server smiled. We have a house-made elderflower soda. It is very good. That, Nora said. I can order for myself, Caleb said. You were going to order tap water on your birthday. You forfeited the right. Owen did not look up from his drawing. She is right, he said. Tap water on your birthday is a sad person choice. Caleb looked at the boy. Do you always agree with your mother? When she is correct, Owen said, which is most of the time, except about the structural limitations of the proposed cafe expansion. But that is a separate conversation. Caleb looked at Nora. He is redesigning my cafe, she said, in the tone of someone who had explained this many times, and had stopped being surprised by it. He has opinions about load-bearing walls. I have informed opinions, Owen said. There is a difference. The food arrived for Nora and Owen, a roasted chicken for Nora, a pasta dish for Owen that he inspected with the critical eye of a health inspector before approving it. The server handed Caleb a menu. He opened it, looked at the tasting menu, and ordered it without hesitation. Owen looked up. That is 7 courses. I know. You are going to be here for 2 hours. I know. Owen looked at his mother. His mother looked at her chicken. A small smile appeared at the corner of her mouth that she appeared to be actively suppressing. All right, Owen said, and returned to his drawing. The elderflower soda arrived. It was, Caleb had to admit, excellent, light and floral, with a sweetness that was not cloying, served in a tall glass with a sprig of something green that he could not identify. He drank half of it before the first course appeared, and when it did, a small plate of seared scallops with a citrus foam that should have been pretentious and was instead perfect. He understood why the restaurant had a 3-hour wait. Good? Nora asked. Very. The chef here trained in Lion for 4 years. You can taste it in the sauces. Caleb looked at her. You know the chef's background? I know every chef's background in this city, she said it without arrogance. Simply as a statement of fact, the way someone might say they knew every street in their neighborhood. I am a pastry chef. Research is part of the job. You study other restaurants? I study what other people do well so I can do it differently, She cut a piece of chicken with the precise efficiency of someone who was comfortable with knives. What do you study? Markets, company, risk. Sounds exhausting. It is, Caleb said. And then, because it was true, and because something about sitting at this counter with this woman and her son made honesty feel less dangerous than it usually did, it has been exhausting for a long time. Nora looked at him for a moment. Not with pity, he would have closed down immediately at pity, but with the particular attention of someone who was genuinely listening. "Why do you keep doing it?" she asked. "Because I am good at it. That is not a reason. That is a qualification." Caleb opened his mouth, closed it. The second course arrived, a small bowl of something with truffle and cream that smelled like a very good decision, and he used the moment to think about the fact that he could not remember the last time someone had challenged one of his answers within 5 minutes of meeting him. "It pays well," he said finally. Nora nodded slowly. "Better," she said. "Honest, at least." Owen looked up from his drawing. "Mom says, you should always know the real reason you do things, even if it is embarrassing." "Owen," Nora said. "What?" "It is true. You say it all the time. I say it to you. Not to strangers at restaurant counters. He is not a stranger any more. He has been here for 20 minutes, and he knows what a cantilever is." Owen looked at Caleb with the gravity of a judge delivering a verdict. "He is an acquaintance." "Thank you," Caleb said. "You are welcome. What is your real reason?" Caleb looked at the boy, 7 years old, with a ruler tucked into the pocket of his jacket, like a pen drawing architectural plans on restaurant paper, asking questions that adults spent years avoiding. "I don't know yet," Caleb said. Owen considered this. "That is actually a good answer," he said. "Most people make something up." By the third course, a small plate of duck confit with a cherry reduction that was almost aggressively good. Caleb had learned the following things about Nora Callahan. She had grown up in Charleston, left for culinary school in New York at 18, spent 7 years working in other people's kitchens in 3 different cities, and come back to Charleston 4 years ago to open her own place. She had done it with a combination of personal savings, a small business loan, and the kind of stubborn determination that other people sometimes mistake for recklessness. He had learned that her cafe was called the Callahan, that it specialized in pastry and coffee, and what she described as serious breakfast food for people who believe that a croissant is worth taking your time over, and that it was on a side street off King Street that he had walked past probably 100 times without going in. He had also learned that she did not eat dessert at restaurants. "You are a pastry chef," he said. "Yes. And you don't order dessert when you go out." "I make dessert for a living. When I go out, I want someone else's food." That is the most specific professional boundary I've ever heard. Wait until you hear my opinion on people who describe food as a journey. What is your opinion? It is food. It is delicious or it isn't. It doesn't need a passport. Owen looked up. Mom hates the word journey when it is about food. I don't hate it. I find it imprecise. She makes a face. I do not make a face. Owen demonstrated the face. It was a masterpiece of barely contained disdain, executed with the accuracy of someone who had studied the original extensively. Caleb laughed. It came out before he could stop it. A real laugh, not the polite version he deployed in meetings, but the kind that started somewhere in the chest and arrived without warning. Nora looked at him with something that might have been surprise. "What?" he said. "Nothing," she said. You laugh differently than you talk." "How do I talk?" "Like someone who has been in a lot of meetings." She picked up her glass. "You laugh like a normal person." "I am a normal person." "You ordered the 7-course tasting menu alone on your birthday at a restaurant where you didn't have a reservation, after being turned away by a host who is approximately the age of my car." She tilted her head. Normal is a generous description. Fair, Caleb said. The fourth course arrived. Owen had finished his pasta and was now fully engaged in his drawing, his tongue slightly out in the way that indicated deep concentration. The restaurant around them had reached that particular Friday night pitch, full and warm and loud, in a way that somehow made the counter feel like its own separate world, a little quieter, a little more contained. "Can I ask you something?" Caleb said. "You can ask. I reserve the right not to answer. Why did you invite me to sit down?" Nora was quiet for a moment. She turned her glass slowly on the counter. "You looked like someone who needed a place to land," she said. "I know what that looks like. From experience." She glanced at Owen, who was drawing with complete absorption. "From a lot of experience," she said. Then, lightly closing the door on that particular hallway, "Also, Marcus was going to put you on the waiting list for 3 hours, and you had that look people get when they're about to do something. They'll regret. I didn't want to watch. What kind of something? I don't know. Argue with him. Leave and eat something terrible from a food truck. Spend your birthday in your car," she shrugged. None of those seemed like good options. The food truck option isn't necessarily bad. It is on your birthday. You have strong opinions about birthdays. "I have strong opinions about most things," she said it without apology. Owen's teacher says it is a personality trait. Owen says it is a superpower. I say it depends on the day. Owen looked up. "It is a superpower," he said firmly, and returned to his drawing. The fifth course arrived, a small fish dish with a beurre blanc that was so good Caleb paused mid-sentence to acknowledge it. And somewhere between the fifth and sixth courses the conversation shifted. Not dramatically, not with any announcement. It simply went deeper, the way conversations do when the food is good and the hour is late and both people have stopped performing. Nora talked about the café, not the business of it, but the feeling of it, the way it smelled at 5 in the morning when the first batch of croissants came out of the oven. The regulars who came every day and ordered the same thing and whose names she knew and whose lives she followed in the small, incremental way that you follow the lives of people you see briefly but consistently. The way her grandmother's recipes felt different when she made them in her own kitchen versus anyone else's, like the food remembered where it came from. Caleb talked about his brother. He had not planned to. He had not talked about Marcus to anyone outside his immediate family in almost 3 years, and even then only in the careful abbreviated way that grief becomes when you have carried it long enough that you have learned to carry it quietly. But something about the counter, the late hour, the elderflower soda, the way Nora listened, not waiting for her turn to speak, but actually listening, made the words arrive before he could decide whether to let them. "He was 29, Caleb said. He called me in the afternoon to remind me about his birthday dinner. I told him I'd be there by 7. I was in a meeting that ran until 9:30. By the time I got to the restaurant, he'd already left. He stopped. He was in an accident on the way home. A driver ran a red light." The counter was quiet for a moment. "I am sorry," Nora said. She said it simply, without the elaborate softening that people sometimes apply to condolences, as if the words needed padding. Just, "I am sorry." Clean and direct and real. "It was 3 years ago," Caleb said. I am not telling you this for." "I know," she said. "You are telling me because it is your birthday, and you've been carrying it around all day, and it needed somewhere to go." He looked at her. "I told you," she said. "I know what that looks like." Owen, without looking up from his drawing, reached across the counter and put his hand briefly on Caleb's arm. It lasted approximately 2 seconds. Then he picked up his green crayon and continued drawing. Caleb looked at the boy's hand, then at the drawing, then at Nora. "He does that," she said quietly, "when someone needs it. He is 7. He has been 7 for a while. He came out of the womb paying attention to people." She looked at her son with an expression that was not quite pride and not quite wonder, but was somewhere between the two. "It is a gift and a responsibility. I am still figuring out how to explain that to him." The 6th course arrived, then the 7th. By the time the meal was finished it was 10:45 in the evening, and the restaurant had thinned to its last few tables, and Caleb realized he had been sitting at this counter for nearly 2 hours, and had not once thought about the quarterly projections. Owen finished his drawing at 10:52. He had been working on it with the focused seriousness of a professional throughout the meal, periodically selecting crayons with the deliberation of someone making important decisions, occasionally holding the paper at arm's length to assess proportion. Now he turned it toward Caleb with the quiet confidence of an artist presenting a completed work. It was a crayon drawing of 3 figures at a counter. On the left, a woman with dark hair and a small mark on her left sleeve that was clearly meant to be flour. She was drawn with a slight forward lean, as if in the middle of saying something. On the right, a very tall man in a jacket, with an expression that Owen had rendered as a combination of raised eyebrows and a slightly open mouth. In the middle, a smaller figure with a ruler in his pocket, sitting very straight. Underneath, in careful 7-year-old handwriting, U.S. Counter. "Friday. That is me," Caleb said, pointing to the tall figure. "Yes," Owen said. "Why do I look confused?" "Because you came here alone on your birthday," Owen said, as if this were self-evident. "That is a confused person thing to do." "Owen," Nora said, "it is not mean. It is observational." Owen looked at Caleb. "You can have it, if you want. I have the original in my head." Caleb looked at the drawing for a moment, the flower on Nora's sleeve, the ruler in Owen's pocket, his own expression rendered in crayon with more accuracy than he would have liked. "Thank you," he said. "I'd like that." Owen nodded, satisfied, and folded the drawing into thirds with the precision of someone who had thought about paper folding. He handed it to Caleb. "Don't lose it," he said. "It is a primary source document." "Of what?" "Of tonight." Owen looked at him with the calm certainty of a child who has already decided how the story ends. "You are going to want to remember tonight." Caleb looked at Nora. Nora was looking at her coffee with an expression that suggested she was choosing not to respond to that. They paid their separate bills. Nora had been firm about this before Caleb could suggest otherwise, and he had learned quickly enough that firmness was her natural register, and walked out into the October night. The air had cooled while they were inside. King Street was quieter now. The dinner crowd thinned to couples walking slowly and a few groups moving between bars. The lamp posts cast circles of gold on the brick sidewalk. Somewhere down the block a musician was playing something slow on a guitar, the notes carrying easily in the still air. Owen walked ahead of them, stepping carefully on the brick patterns in the sidewalk, with the focused attention of someone navigating a complex system. "He is avoiding the mortar lines," Nora said. "Why?" "He says the bricks are the structural elements. The mortar is just filler. You should always walk on the structure. That is either very profound or very 7 years old." With Owen, those are usually the same thing. They walked for half a block in a silence that was not uncomfortable. Caleb had spent enough time in uncomfortable silences to know the difference. This one had a texture to it, not empty, but full of things that had been said and things that had not been said yet, and the particular quality of air between two people who are both aware that something has shifted without being ready to name it. "Thank you," he said, "for the seat. And the conversation." "You are easy to talk to," Nora said, "when you stop being careful." "I am not careful." She gave him a look. "I am professionally cautious," he said. "That is the same thing with a better salary." She stopped walking. Owen had stopped ahead of them, crouching to examine something on the sidewalk, a crack in the brick that he was measuring with his ruler. "Caleb." "Yes." "What do you actually do?" "Not the category. The specific thing." He looked at her. In the lamplight, with the flower still on her sleeve and her hair coming loose from whatever it had started as, she looked like someone who had been working all day and was still completely present. He thought about the answer he usually gave, the one that was technically accurate and revealed nothing. "I find companies that are worth more than the market thinks they are," he said, "and I invest in them before everyone else figures it out. And you are good at it." "Yes." "How good?" He paused. "Very." She studied him for a moment. Then she nodded, as if this confirmed something she had already suspected. "Okay," she said. "That is honest." Owen stood up from his examination of the crack. "Mom," he said, "we should give him our number." "Owen." "We should. He is going to want to come to the caf. Owen looked at Caleb with the directness of someone who has not yet learned to be indirect. "You should come to the caf. Mom makes the best croissants in Charleston, possibly in the state." "Possibly," Nora said. "Probably," Owen said. "I am being conservative, because I haven't tried every croissant in the state. But the ones I've tried aren't better." "I don't really eat pastry," Caleb said. Owen stared at him. "Why not?" It is not something I usually." "That is not a reason." "That is an avoidance." Owen turned to his mother. "He does the same thing you do when I ask why we can't have a dog." "We can't have a dog because the Café has health code regulations about animals on the premises." "That is a reason," Owen said. "What is his reason?" Caleb looked at the boy. "I don't have one," he admitted. "Then you should come to the café," Owen said, with the finality of someone closing a logical argument. He looked at his mother. "Give him our number." "Owen, he can find us. We're on King Street." "He won't come unless he has the number. People need a direct line. It is like a load-bearing wall. You need the connection or the structure doesn't hold." Owen looked at Caleb. "What is your number?" "I'll put it in Mom's phone." Owen. But Owen was already holding out his hand for his mother's phone, with the patient persistence of someone who had won this kind of argument before, and was confident in the outcome. Nora looked at Caleb. Her expression was somewhere between exasperation and something that was trying very hard not to be amusement. "You don't have to," she said. "I know," Caleb said. He gave Owen the number. Owen entered it with careful precision, checked it twice, and handed the phone back to his mother. "Done," he said. "Now we have a direct line." He looked at Caleb. "Come on, a weekday morning, before 9. That is when the croissants are best. After 9 they're still good, but the first hour is the best hour." "I'll keep that in mind," Caleb said. Owen nodded, satisfied, and resumed his navigation of the brick patterns on the sidewalk. Nora and Caleb stood for a moment in the lamplight. "I am sorry," she said. "He has no concept of social boundaries." "Don't apologize," Caleb said. "He is the most honest person I've met in years." Nora looked at her son, who was now measuring the distance between lamp-posts with his ruler and recording the results in a small notebook he had produced from somewhere. "Yeah," she said quietly. "He is." They parted at the corner. Nora's car was on the next block. Caleb's was 3 blocks in the other direction. He watched them walk away, Owen still narrating something about the lamp-post spacing. Nora's hand on his shoulder, the flower still on her sleeve, catching the light. He sat in his car for 4 minutes before driving home. He did not turn on the radio. He texted 2 days later. He had written and deleted 4 different versions of the message before sending the 5th, which said Owen mentioned weekday mornings before 9. Is that a standing invitation, or was he speaking theoretically? The response came 11 minutes later. It is standing, but I should warn you, he is going to quiz you on load-bearing walls. Caleb arrived at the Callahan at 7 in the morning on a Tuesday. The café was on a side street off King Street, in a narrow building with a pale blue door and a hand-lettered sign in the window that said simply open in a script that looked like it had been written by someone who had strong feelings about letter forms. The window display held a small arrangement of pastries on a tiered stand, croissants, something with dark chocolate and sea salt, a tart with fruit arranged in a pattern that was either very precise or made to look effortlessly imprecise, and he could not tell which he suspected was the point. He pushed open the door. The smell hit him before anything else, butter and coffee and something warm with vanilla that was not cloying, but was instead the olfactory equivalent of a very good morning. The space was small and deliberate, 6 tables, a long counter with 4 stools, exposed brick on one wall with framed photographs that turned out, on closer inspection, to be handwritten recipe cards enlarged to poster size. The handwriting was old-fashioned and precise, the kind that belonged to someone who had learned to write, when handwriting was considered a skill worth developing. Behind the counter, Nora was working. She had her hair pinned up with what appeared to be a pencil, an actual pencil, not a decorative one, and was wearing a white apron over a dark shirt, and she was doing something with a laminated dough that involved a rolling pin and a level of focused attention that suggested she was not going to look up immediately. There was flour on her left sleeve. Of course there was. Owen was at the corner table with a textbook, a notebook, and the ruler, doing homework, with the same focused intensity his mother was applying to the dough. "Sit anywhere," Nora said, without looking up. "Coffee's on the counter. Self-serve until I finish this layer." Caleb sat at the counter. There was a carafe of coffee and a stack of cups. He poured himself a cup and drank it, and it was, without qualification, the best coffee he had had in months. Dark and clean, with a brightness at the finish that suggested someone had thought carefully about the beans. "Good morning," Owen said from the corner, without looking up from his textbook. "Good morning," Caleb said. "You came before 9. "I did." "Good. The croissants are in the oven." 14 more minutes. Owen turned a page. "What do you know about the Roebling suspension bridge system?" "Not much. I'll explain it to you when I finish this problem." Owen wrote something in his notebook. "It is relevant to the Café expansion." Nora finally looked up from the dough. She looked at Caleb, then at the coffee cup in his hand, then at Owen, then back at Caleb. "He has been planning to explain the Roebling system to someone for 3 weeks," she said. "You are the first person who hasn't immediately changed the subject." "I am interested," Caleb said. "You haven't heard the explanation yet." "Fair point." The door opened, and a woman came in, tall, with close-cropped hair, and the brisk efficiency of someone who moved through the world at a slightly faster pace than everyone else. She was carrying a leather bag and a phone and a coffee from somewhere else, which she set on the counter with the slight guilt of someone who knows they should have waited. She looked at Caleb, then at Nora, then back at Caleb, with the particular attention of a person who has just noticed something interesting. "Simone," Nora said, not looking up from the dough. "Don't." "I am not doing anything," Simone said. "You have your doing something face." "I have a neutral face." "You have never had a neutral face in your life." Nora set down the rolling pin and looked at her friend. "Simone Park, Caleb Whitmore." "Caleb, Simone is my best friend, and a civil litigator, and she is going to pretend she stopped by to drop off documents. But she actually came to look at you." Simone extended her hand to Caleb with the smooth confidence of someone who had shaken a lot of hands in professional setting. "Nice to meet you," she said. "I did also bring documents." "What documents?" Nora asked. Simone put the leather bag on the counter and produced a folder. The lease renewal. You need to sign by Friday. I know. Leave it. Simone left the folder and did not leave. She sat on the stool 2 down from Caleb and poured herself a coffee with the ease of someone who had done this many times, and looked at him with open, professional curiosity. So, she said, technology infrastructure. Caleb looked at Nora. I may have mentioned what you do, Nora said, with the slight neutrality of someone who had mentioned more than that. Whitmore Capital, Simone said. Series B and C investments, primarily in data, infrastructure, and logistics technology. 14 portfolio companies, 3 successful exits in the last 4 years, currently managing approximately. Simone, Nora said. I Googled, Simone said, without apology. It is due diligence. It is not a deposition. Everything is a deposition if you approach it correctly. Simone looked at Caleb. She didn't know who you were when she invited you to sit down. I know, Caleb said. She knows now. I know that, too. Simone looked at Nora. Nora was looking at the dough with the focused attention of someone who had decided the dough required her full concentration. The croissants are ready, Owen announced from the corner, without looking up from his textbook. Timer went off 30 seconds ago. Nora went to the oven. The smell that came out when she opened it was, Caleb thought, the best argument for leaving the office before 9 in the morning that he had ever encountered. She put a plate of croissants on the counter. They were golden and layered and slightly irregular in the way that handmade things are irregular. Not imperfect, but individual, each one different from the others in small ways that proved they had been made by a person and not a machine. I don't eat pastry, Caleb said. You've mentioned, Nora said. He ate 3 croissants. They were extraordinary, buttery and light, with a slight resistance in the outer layers that gave way to something almost creamy inside, with a flavor that was simple and complete in the way that very good things are simple and complete. Those were pastry, he said, after the 3rd one. Yes, Nora said. I said, I don't eat pastry. You said that, yes. Those were different. Were they? They were in a different category. Nora looked at him with an expression that was not quite a smile, but was adjacent to one. That, she said, is the most billionaire sentence I have ever heard. Caleb stopped. She was looking at him steadily, without alarm, without the particular shift in register that happened when people found out, the slight recalibration, the new carefulness, the way the conversation changed temperature. You have a Whitmore Capital coffee mug in your car, she said. I saw it when you parked. I looked you up after the 2nd croissant. She picked up her own coffee. I was going to mention it earlier, but you seemed to be enjoying not being recognized, so I let it go. Caleb was quiet for a moment. You knew, he said, since Monday morning. And you didn't say anything. You weren't ready to. She set down her cup. Are you ready now? He looked at her, the flower on her sleeve, the pencil in her hair, the recipe cards on the wall behind her in the handwriting that he now understood belonged to someone she had loved. Yes, he said. Good, she said. Then tell me about your brother. It became a habit the way good habits form, not through decision, but through repetition, that one day you notice has become necessary. Caleb came to the Café on Tuesday, then Thursday, then the following Monday, which was not a day he had planned, but which happened because he was driving past King Street at 7:15 in the morning, and the pale blue door was lit from inside, and he pulled over before he had consciously decided to. By the 3rd week, Owen had reserved the 2nd stool from the left as Caleb's stool, which he communicated by placing his ruler on it when Caleb was not there and removing it when he arrived. When Caleb asked about this system, Owen explained that reserved seating was a structural necessity in any high-traffic space, and that the ruler was a placeholder, not a decoration. "It is a decoration," Nora said, from behind the counter. "It is a placeholder," Owen said. "It is both," Caleb said, and Owen accepted this compromise with the dignity of someone who had gotten the more important half of the argument. On the fourth Thursday, Nora suggested a walk. Owen had a school event that evening, a presentation on the history of Charleston's architecture that he had been preparing for with the intensity of someone defending a doctoral thesis, and Renata, Nora's mother, was picking him up at 6. This left a 2-hour window that Nora described as an accidental evening off, and that she appeared to regard with the slight suspicion of someone not entirely sure what to do with unstructured time. "The Battery," she said. "Have you walked it recently?" "Not in years," Caleb said. "Then you've forgotten what the city looks like." They met at the White Point Garden at 7 in the evening. The light was doing the October thing again, low and golden, turning the harbor to hammered copper, the old cannons on the lawn casting long shadows across the grass. The air smelled like salt water, and the particular clean coolness that comes off the harbor in the fall, and somewhere in the park a group of children were running in the way that children run when they have been sitting still all day, and have finally been released. Nora was already there when he arrived, sitting on a bench near the water, looking at the harbor with the expression of someone who had grown up looking at this view, and still had not gotten tired of it. "You are early," Caleb said. "I am always early. Being late is disrespectful to other people's time." She stood up. "Owen says the same thing. I don't know if I taught him or if he came with it." "Probably both," Caleb said. They walked south along the seawall, the harbor on their left, the antebellum houses on their right, the grand ones with their double piazzas and their iron gates and their gardens that were still green even in October. Nora knew the history of most of them, not in a tour guide way, but in the way that someone knows the stories of a place they have lived, in long enough to hear them accumulate. "That one," she said, pointing to a yellow house with a walled garden, "was a boarding house in the 1880s. The woman who ran it was apparently a spectacular cook. There are letters in the Historical Society, archives from guests describing her biscuits in a way that is almost embarrassing." Embarrassing how? One man wrote that they were the finest argument for remaining in Charleston he had yet encountered. He had been planning to move to Atlanta. Did he stay? He stayed for 11 years. Married the cook's daughter. Nora smiled. "The biscuit recipe is still in the archives. I've made it. It holds up. Of course you've made it." "Research," she said simply. They walked in comfortable silence for a moment. The harbor was very still. A container ship was moving slowly toward the port, its lights reflected in long lines on the water. "Can I ask you something?" Caleb said. "You can ask." Owen mentioned his father once. At the restaurant. He said he was in the picture and then cut himself out. He paused. "You don't have to." "Derek," Nora said. She said the name, the way you say a word you have said. So many times it has lost most of its charge, not without weight, but without drama. "We were together for 3 years. Engaged for one of them. He was also my business partner. He came in during the startup phase of the Café, contributed some money, helped with the early operations." "What happened?" "The Café started doing well." She looked at the water. "When it was a risk, Derek was very enthusiastic about the partnership. When it became a success, he wanted to expand. Fast. And a second location, then a third, franchise agreements. The whole thing. I said no." "Why?" "Because the Cass is built on my grandmother's recipes. Her handwriting is on those walls. Her name is in the name." She paused. "You can't franchise a promise. You can't scale something that only works because it is specific." She said it without heat. She had clearly thought about this many times and arrived at a position she was certain of. Derek didn't see it that way. He saw a revenue stream with untapped potential. He left. He left. Both the engagement and the partnership. He signed a dissolution agreement, his contribution returned, his interest in the business formally ended. She stopped walking and looked at the harbor. Owen was 2 years old. Derek had been present enough that Owen knew who he was, but not present enough that his leaving made a large hole. She was quiet for a moment. I think that is the part I am most angry about, actually. Not that he left me, that he left in a way that was so incomplete. Not enough to grieve properly, just enough to explain to a 2-year-old. What did you tell him? I told him that some people aren't ready to stay, and that it wasn't about him. She looked at Caleb. He accepted that. He has always been. He doesn't hold on to things that aren't useful. He just moves to the next structural problem. Caleb was quiet for a moment. The container ship had moved further toward the port, its light smaller now against the dark water. My brother's name was Marcus, he said. Nora looked at him. He was 29. He was the better version of me, funnier, more patient, better at being in a room with people without calculating the exit. He looked at the water. He called me at 2 in the afternoon, on his birthday, to remind me about the dinner. I told him I'd be there by 7. I had a meeting that I knew was going to run long, and I chose not to reschedule it. Caleb, I'm not telling you this for absolution, he said. I've had enough therapy to know that what happened wasn't my fault in any causal sense. The driver ran the light. That is the fact. He paused. But I also know that I made a choice that night that I would not make now. And I've spent 3 years building a company that is worth a great deal of money, and that I go to every day, and that I am very good at, and I have not once felt the way I felt sitting at that counter on Friday night. Nora was looking at him with the same quality of attention she had given him at the restaurant. Not waiting, not performing, just present. How did you feel? She asked. Like I was somewhere I was supposed to be, he said, which is not something I have felt in a long time. The silence that followed was the kind that does not need to be filled. Then, from somewhere behind them on the path, a small voice said, I knew it. They both turned. Owen was standing on the path approximately 15 feet behind them, wearing his jacket and his backpack and holding his ruler, with the expression of someone who has arrived at a scene he predicted. Owen, Nora said, what are you doing here? You have the architecture presentation. It ended early. Grandma Renata dropped me off. He walked toward them with the unhurried confidence of someone who knows he is exactly where he is supposed to be. I texted you. Nora looked at her phone. You texted me 4 minutes ago. I walked fast. Owen stopped in front of them and looked at Caleb with the calm assessment of a structural engineer examining a load-bearing element. You both have sad things you carry around, he said. My teacher says that is why people find each other. Owen, Nora said. She is 26, Owen said. But she is right. He looked at the harbor. The light is good right now. Can we walk to the end? They walked to the end. Owen narrated the architectural history of every building they passed, pausing at intervals to measure things with his ruler and record the results in his notebook. Nora walked beside Caleb. Their hands were close but not touching. The harbor turned from copper to silver as the last of the light left the sky. At the end of the sea-wall, Owen stopped and looked out at the water. This is the best view in the city, he said. I've measured the sight lines. No obstructions for approximately 1.4 miles. How did you measure 1.4 miles? Caleb asked. Estimation based on known reference points and angular calculation. Owen looked at him. I showed my work. Mom checked it. He is not wrong, Nora said. I know, Owen said. I rarely am. He looked at Caleb with the directness that was simply his natural mode. "Are you going to keep coming to the café?" "Yes," Caleb said. "Good." Owen turned back to the water. "The croissants are better when there is someone to share them with. Mom makes too many for just us." "I make the right amount," Nora said. "You make enough for 4 people, and there are 2 of us," Owen said. "That is too many." He looked at Caleb. "You should come every morning." "Owen," Nora said. "What?" "It is a practical solution to a structural problem." He tucked his ruler into his pocket and looked at the harbor with the satisfaction of someone who has said what needed to be said. "Also, you both make the worried face when you think nobody's looking. It is better when you are together. You make it less." Nora looked at Caleb. Caleb looked at Nora. Neither of them said anything. Owen had already started walking back toward the park, narrating the lamp-post spacing to himself, and neither of them moved to follow him for a moment. "He is right," Caleb said quietly. "About the croissants or the worried face?" "Both." Nora looked at the harbor for one more moment. Then she looked at him. "Come tomorrow," she said, "before 9. I'll be there at 7. 6:45, she said. "That is when the first batch comes out." 3 weeks passed. They were, by any honest accounting, 3 of the better weeks Caleb had experienced in recent memory. He came to the café most mornings. On the days he could not come, he sent a text that Owen had established as the correct protocol, a brief message confirming absence and estimated return date, which Owen tracked in his notebook under the heading Structural Attendance Record, and which Nora pretended not to know about. On 2 evenings the 3 of them had dinner together. Once at a Vietnamese restaurant on Upper King Street that Owen approved of because the owner had done something structurally interesting with the ceiling, and once at the café itself, after closing, when Nora made pasta from scratch and Owen gave Caleb a detailed briefing on his expansion plans for the second room, complete with hand-drawn diagrams and a formal presentation that lasted 40 minutes and included a question and answer period. Caleb had questions. Owen answered them with the patience of someone who had been waiting a long time for a qualified audience. On a Wednesday morning in the 4th week, Caleb arrived at the Café at 6:45 to find the pale blue door unlocked, but the lights in the front room lower than usual. He pushed it open and heard from the back the particular quality of silence. That means someone is sitting very still. He found Nora at the small desk in the office behind the kitchen, a room that was barely large enough for the desk and 2 chairs and the filing cabinet that held 5 years of meticulous records. She was sitting with a white envelope in her hands, open, the letter inside partially unfolded. She was not reading it. She was looking at it the way you look at something you have already read enough times to have memorized and are now simply sitting with. Nor. She looked up. Her expression was controlled in the way that expressions are controlled when someone has been working on the control for the last 20 minutes. "Derek filed a civil claim," she said. "He is asserting 40% co-ownership of the Café, based on alleged financial contributions during the startup phase." Caleb crossed the small room and took the letter from her hands. He read it carefully, twice. The claim was detailed and specific. It cited dates, amounts, and a partnership agreement that Derek's attorney was characterizing as still legally operative on the grounds that the dissolution Nora believed she had finalized had been signed, according to Derek's filing, under conditions of duress. "This dissolution agreement," Caleb said. "You have a copy." "I have everything," Nora said. "I have every document from the beginning. Every receipt, every transfer record, every communication." She said it with the flat certainty of someone who had always known, somewhere in the back of their mind, that this day might come. "I kept everything because I knew. I always knew he might try something." "Good. That is good." Caleb set the letter on the desk. "Who is his attorney?" Nora looked at the letterhead. "Hargrove and Associates." Caleb was quiet for a moment. "What?" Nora said. Hargrove is the most aggressive civil litigation firm in South Carolina. They specialize in business disputes. They have a reputation for extended discovery processes designed to exhaust the opposing party financially before the case ever reaches a judge. Nora looked at the letter. Then she looked at the ceiling. Then she looked back at the letter. Of course he did, she said. Owen appeared in the doorway of the office in his school uniform, backpack already on, ruler in hand. He looked at his mother. He looked at the letter. He looked at Caleb. "What is a co-claimant?" he asked. Nora moved the letter before Owen could read further. "Someone who wants something that isn't theirs," she said. Owen considered this. "Like when Tyler took my ruler. Exactly like that." "What happened with Tyler's ruler situation?" Caleb asked. "I explained the concept of property rights and the social contract," Owen said. "He gave it back." He looked at his mother. "Is this the Derek situation?" Nora looked at her son. "What do you know about the Derek situation?" "I know there is one," Owen said. "I am 7, not oblivious." He adjusted his backpack straps with the efficiency of someone who had places to be. "Are you going to be okay?" "Yes," Nora said. "Are you sure?" "I am sure." Owen looked at her for a moment with the measuring attention that was his most characteristic expression. Then he looked at Caleb. "Make sure she eats breakfast," he said. "She skips it when she is worried." "Owen," Nora said. "It is a structural necessity," Owen said. "You can't run a kitchen on coffee alone." He kissed his mother on the cheek, and walked out of the office with the unhurried confidence of someone who has said what needed to be said. The front door opened and closed. Nora looked at the space where her son had been standing. "He is going to be insufferable when he is an adult," she said. "He is going to be extraordinary," Caleb said. She looked at the letter again. "I need to call Simone." "Call her?" "And Nora." "Don't," she said. "Not unkindly, just clearly. I know what you are going to say. I know you have resources and connections and people who handle things like this, and I appreciate it. But this is my caf. My grandmother's name is on that wall. I need to handle this in a way I can live with." Caleb looked at her. "All right," he said. "Call Simone. Tell me what you need." She picked up her phone. "Breakfast," she said. Owen was right. "I need to eat something before I talk to a lawyer." Caleb went to the kitchen and made eggs. Simone arrived at the Café at 8 that morning with the focused energy of someone who had already read the filing twice on her phone during the drive over and had opinions about it. "Hargrove," she said, dropping the folder on the counter. "Of course it is Hargrove. Derek always did have good taste in weapons." "You know him?" Caleb asked. "I know of him. We've never been on opposite sides, but I know his work." She poured herself a coffee and sat down. "He is going to file for discovery on everything. Financial records, communications, operational history. He is going to make this as expensive and time-consuming as possible in the hope that Nora runs out of resources before it gets to a judge." "I know," Nora said. "Which means we need to move fast and document everything before he can establish a narrative." Simone looked at the filing again. "The duress claim is interesting. He is saying you pressured him into signing the dissolution agreement. That is a lie. I know it is a lie. But he has a witness who says otherwise." Simone looked at Nora carefully. "His filing lists a character witness, Renata Callahan." The kitchen was very quiet for a moment. Nora set down her fork. "My mother," she said. "Yes." Nora was still for a long moment. Then she picked up her fork again and ate a bite of eggs with the deliberate calm of someone choosing not to react until they have thought about what reaction is appropriate. Caleb watched her. "Tell me about Derek," he said. Not because he needed the information for any strategic purpose, but because she needed to say it and he wanted to be the person she said it to. Nora was quiet for a moment. Simone, who knew when to give space, refilled her coffee and moved to the far end of the counter with her phone. "I met Derek when I came back to Charleston," Nora said. "He was charming. He was interested in the Café idea in a way that felt genuine. He asked good questions. He understood the concept. He seemed to understand why it mattered to me." She paused. "He contributed $15,000 to the startup costs. Total startup was approximately $125,000. His contribution was real money, but it was not the foundation. The foundation was 5 years of savings and a small business loan, and every favor I had accumulated in 7 years of working in other people's kitchens." "But he characterized it as a partnership," Caleb said. "He characterized it as whatever was useful at the time. When we were struggling in the first year, he characterized it as a loan. He was generously not calling in. When we started doing well, he characterized it as a founding investment that entitled him to strategic input." She looked at her coffee. "When I said no to the expansion, he characterized it as me being too stubborn to recognize a good opportunity. When I said no to the franchise agreement, he characterized it as me being too emotionally attached to my grandmother's memory to make rational business decisions. What did you say to that?" "I said that my grandmother's memory was the entire point, and that anyone who couldn't understand that had fundamentally misunderstood what we were building." She looked up. "He left 2 weeks later. We signed the dissolution agreement in this kitchen, at that table, with Simone as a witness. He took his $15,000 back, plus a small percentage of the first year's profits as a goodwill gesture that I now deeply regret." "And your mother?" Nora looked at the recipe cards on the wall. The old handwriting enlarged to poster size, each card a different dish in the same precise script. "My mother always liked Derek," she said. "She thought I was too difficult, too independent, too unwilling to compromise, too attached to doing things my way. She thought Derek was good for me because he pushed back." A pause. "She wasn't entirely wrong about the attachment. I am attached. I am specifically and deliberately attached to doing this the way my grandmother would have recognized. That is not a flaw. That is the whole point. But your mother sees it as stubbornness. My mother sees most things I do as stubbornness." Nora said it without bitterness, just the flat recognition of a long-established dynamic. "She loves me. She also thinks I make everything harder than it needs to be. Derek told her I pressured him into signing the dissolution agreement. She believed him because it fit a story she already had about me." Caleb was quiet for a moment. "What did he actually want?" he asked. "Not legally. What does he actually want?" Nora looked at him. "Control," she said. "He has always wanted control. When he had it, he didn't value it. When I took it back, he couldn't accept it." She paused. "The calf, see, is doing well now. Better than well. We were written up in a national food publication last spring. There is a waiting list for weekend reservations. Derek sees something that is worth more than it was when he left, and he wants his piece of it. He is not going to get it," Simone said, from the end of the counter, without looking up from her phone. "No," Nora said, "he is not." She said it with the quiet certainty of someone who has already decided the outcome and is now simply working backward to make it happen. Not bravado, something more grounded than that. The certainty of someone who knows exactly what they built and exactly how they built it, and is not afraid of anyone examining the evidence. Caleb looked at her across the counter, the flower on her sleeve, the pencil in her hair, the recipe cards on the wall behind her. "I want to help," he said. "I know," she said, "and I know what you are going to say." "Then I don't need to say it." "But I am going to say it anyway." He leaned forward. I am not offering to take this over. I am not offering to make it go away with money. I am offering to make sure you have the resources to fight it the way it deserves to be fought, on the merits, with the best possible support, so that when you win completely." Nora looked at him for a long moment. "When I win," she said. "When," he said. Something shifted in her expression, not softening exactly, but a kind of recognition. "All right," she said. "We'll talk about what that looks like, but I set the terms." "Always," he said. The building was on Broad Street, 12 stories of restored brick and glass, that managed to look both historic and contemporary in the way that very expensive renovations sometimes achieve. The name on the lobby directory was discreet: Whitmore Capital, floors 8 through 11, in the same clean typeface as the other tenants, giving no particular indication that it occupied a third of the building. Nora stood on the sidewalk and looked at it. "You have a building," she said. "I have floors in a building," Caleb said. "Your name is on the lobby directory. It is also on my coffee mug." You weren't alarmed by the mug. The mug holds 12 ounces of coffee. This holds approximately, she looked at the building, a significant portion of your professional identity. "They're both containers," Caleb said. Nora looked at him. "That is not a defense." Simone, who had arrived separately and was waiting near the entrance with the contained energy of someone who had been briefed and was ready to proceed, looked at the building and then at Nora, with an expression that said she had things to say and was choosing the right moment. "Simone," Nora said, "I haven't said anything. You are about to. I am professionally neutral. You've never been professionally neutral in your life." They went inside. The lobby had the particular quality of spaces that have been designed by someone who understood that restraint is more impressive than display. Pale stone floors, a reception desk staffed by 2 people who greeted Caleb with the easy familiarity of long acquaintance, and a wall of windows that looked out onto a courtyard garden that was, in October, still green. Simone pulled Nora aside near the elevator. "Nora," she said quietly, "don't. He is worth approximately $340 million. "I know." Simone stared at her. "You know?" "I told you. I Googled him after the second croissant." "And you just continued as normal." "He is a person, Simone. He makes bad decisions about breakfast foods, and he laughs differently than he talks, and his brother died, and he spent 3 years being very successful and very alone." Nora looked at the lobby. "The money is a fact about him. It is not the most interesting fact." Simone was quiet for a moment. Then she said, with the careful tone of a lawyer who has just encountered evidence she was not expecting, "Okay, okay, okay, I understand." Simone picked up her bag. "I still have opinions. You always have opinions. It is a gift." The meeting with Caleb's legal team was in a conference room on the 10th floor, with a view of the harbor that was, Nora had to admit, extraordinary, the same water she had walked beside with Caleb 3 weeks ago. But from above, the container ships, visible as small geometric shapes, moving slowly toward the port. The lead attorney was a woman named Patricia Holt, mid-50s, silver hair, the kind of calm that comes from having been in difficult rooms for a long time, and having learned that calm is the most effective tool available. She had already reviewed Derek's filing. "The duress claim is weak," Patricia said, opening the folder. "To establish duress, he needs to demonstrate that you exerted improper pressure that left him no reasonable alternative but to sign, given that he had independent legal counsel at the time of signing." "He did," Nora said. "I insisted on it. I didn't want any ambiguity." Patricia looked up. "You insisted he have his own lawyer before signing the dissolution?" "Yes." Patricia and Simone exchanged a brief look. "That is significant," Patricia said. "It substantially undermines any claim of duress. A person with independent legal representation who signs an agreement is presumed to have understood and consented to its terms." "Then why is he filing?" Nora asked. "Because Hargrove's strategy is not to win on the merits," Patricia said. "It is to make the process so expensive and exhausting that you settle. They'll file motions, request extensive discovery, challenge every document. The goal is attrition. How do we counter that? By being faster and more organized than they expect. If we can demonstrate the weakness of his core claim early, before the discovery phase drains your resources, we can push for a summary judgment that ends this before it becomes a war of attrition." Nora looked at the harbor. "What do you need from me?" "Everything you have. Every document, every communication, every financial record from the beginning of the business to now. If it exists, I want it." "I have it," Nora said. "All of it." Patricia looked at her with the slight recalibration of someone who has been pleasantly surprised. "All of it?" "I kept everything," Nora said, "from the first day." Patricia closed her folder. "Then we're in a better position than I expected." She looked at Caleb. "Your instinct to move quickly was correct." Caleb looked at Nora. "It was her instinct," he said. "She kept the records." Nora looked at him. "He said it's simply without performance, just a correction of the record, accurate and complete." After the meeting, in the hallway outside the conference room, Nora stood at the window and looked at the harbor for a moment. Caleb stood beside her. "You should have told me," she said. "Not angry, just direct." "I know. Not about the money." "I don't care about the money." She looked at him. "About the fact that you were hiding it, that you made a choice to let me not know." "I know," he said again. I've spent a long time in rooms where knowing what I am worth changes how people act. I wanted one situation where it didn't." "And so you made the decision for me," she said. "You decided I couldn't handle knowing." "That is not—" He stopped. "You are right. That is what I did." She looked at him for a moment. "You get one more chance to be honest with me," she said. "One. That is fair." "It is more than fair." She turned back to the window. "It is generous." "I know," he said. "I won't waste it." The harbor was very still. A pelican was moving in a slow arc over the water, banking on a thermal, unhurried. "Patricia is good," Nora said. "She is the best civil litigator I know." "I am going to win this," Nora said, not as a question, not as reassurance, as a statement of established fact. "I know," Caleb said. She looked at him sideways. "You say that a lot. Because you keep saying things that are true." She almost smiled. "Not quite, but almost. Come to the café tomorrow," she said. 6:45. "I'll be there at 6:30, he said. 6:45, she said. "The croissants aren't ready at 6:30. Don't be early for the wrong reason." The motion to freeze the AFA's operating accounts arrived on a Tuesday. Not in a white envelope this time. It came as a digital notification to Nora's business banking app at 11:17 in the evening, a time that Hargrove's office had clearly chosen with the specific intention of ensuring maximum disruption to the following morning's operations. The notification was brief and clinical: account activity, restricted pending court order. Contact your financial institution for details. Nora read it, standing in the kitchen of the Café, where she had been doing the last of the prep work for Wednesday morning. The croissant dough was resting in the refrigerator. The mise-en place for the morning pastries was laid out on the stainless steel counter with a careful organization of someone who had done this so many times that the arrangement was automatic. The kitchen smelled like butter and yeast and the faint sweetness of the vanilla extract she had been using in the morning's brioche. She read the notification again. Then she sat down on the kitchen floor. Not dramatically. There was no collapse, no performance. She simply sat down because standing required energy she did not currently have. And the floor was there, and sometimes the floor is the correct place to be. Around her, on the counter above, were the recipe cards, not the framed enlargements from the front room. Those were copies, printed and mounted. These were the originals, small index cards in her grandmother's handwriting, protected in clear plastic sleeves, organized in a wooden box that had lived in this kitchen since the day Nora opened. Eileen Callahan's handwriting, precise and slightly old-fashioned, each letter formed with the care of someone who had been taught that handwriting was worth doing well. Nora reached up and took the box down from the counter. She sat on the kitchen floor with the box in her lap and looked at the cards. Her grandmother had written these recipes over 40 years. Some of them had notes in the margins, more salt than you think, and the butter must be cold, always cold, and on the croissant card, in slightly larger letters than the rest, patience is the ingredient nobody writes down. Nora had read that note approximately 10,000 times. She had never gotten tired of it. Her phone lit up on the counter above her. She reached up without looking and brought it down. It was Simone. "I saw the notification," Simone said, before Nora could speak. I'm my way. It is almost midnight. I know what time it is. I am coming." A pause. "Are you okay?" "I am sitting on the kitchen floor with my grandmother's recipe box." "That is a no." "It is a complicated yes." Simone arrived 20 minutes later, letting herself in with the spare key she had held. Since the café opened, she found Nora still on the floor, the recipe cards spread around her in a loose arrangement, each one face up. Simone sat down on the floor beside her, without comment. "He froze the accounts," Nora said. "I know. It is a tactical move. He is trying to force a settlement before the hearing. If you can't operate, you can't pay your suppliers, you can't make payroll, you can't—" "I know what it means, Simone." "I know you know." Simone picked up one of the recipe cards. "The one for the almond tart. Nora's grandmother's signature dish." She looked at the handwriting. "We can fight the freeze. It is an emergency motion. Patricia can file a counter motion by Thursday morning, and if the judge doesn't grant it, then we find another way to bridge the gap until the hearing." Simone set the card down carefully. "There are options." "Caleb," Nora said. "He has offered?" "I know he has offered." Nora looked at the cards around her. "If I take his money to keep this place running, and then Derek's lawyer finds out, and he will find out because Hargrove finds everything, he is going to stand in front of a judge and tell a story about a single mother whose café is being bankrolled by her billionaire boyfriend, and ask the judge to wonder whether the business was ever really hers." Simone was quiet for a moment. "That is a risk," she said. "It is not a risk. It is a certainty. Derek already knows about Caleb. He has been watching." Nora picked up the croissant card. "Patience is the ingredient nobody writes down. If I accept Caleb's help and Derek uses it against me in court, I don't just lose the case. I lose the story. I lose the thing that makes this place what it is. The fact that I built it, that it is mine. Nora, I know." She looked at the card. "I know what I am saying. I know. It sounds like pride. It doesn't sound like pride. It sounds like someone who understands exactly what is at stake." Simone leaned back against the cabinet. "But I need you to also understand that there is a version of this where you lose the café entirely because you refused help on principle, and your grandmother's recipes end up in a box, in a storage unit somewhere. The kitchen was very quiet. Nora looked at the cards around her, 40 years of her grandmother's handwriting, spread on the floor of the kitchen that had been built on those recipes, in the city where Eileen Callahan had cooked for 50 years and never written a single recipe down until she was 63, and decided with the practical wisdom of someone who understood that things do not last forever, that she should. Patience is the ingredient nobody writes down. I'll take the bridge loan, Nora said. From Caleb, with terms I set. A formal agreement documented at market rate. She looked at Simone. And then I am going to find a way to win this that doesn't depend on his money. I am going to find something Derek doesn't know I have. What are you looking for? I don't know yet. Nora began carefully replacing the recipe cards in the wooden box. But I kept everything, Simone. Every document, every email, every bank statement. I kept it because I always knew this day might come. She closed the box. There is something in there. I just need to find it. She picked up her phone and typed a message to Caleb. I need the bridge loan. Formal terms, market rate. I'll have Simone draft the agreement. I also need space to think. Not from you, from the situation. I'll explain when I can. The response came in less than a minute. Done. Take the time you need. I am here. Nora looked at the message for a long moment. Then she looked at the recipe box in her lap. Then she looked at Simone. Go home, she said. I am going to start going through the files. It is midnight. I know what time it is. Simone stood up. Call me if you find anything. I'll call you when I find something, Nora said. Not if. After Simone left, Nora sat alone in the kitchen for a moment. Then she went to the office, opened the filing cabinet, and began at the beginning. She pulled out the first folder, Startup Documents, Year 1, and opened it on the desk. The calf, as very quiet around her. The refrigerator held tomorrow's croissant dough. The recipe box sat on the corner of the desk. Outside on the side street, the city was doing what cities do at midnight, settling into itself. The noise of the day replaced by something slower and more honest. Nora turned the first page. She was still reading at 3 in the morning when Owen appeared in the office doorway in his pajamas, his hair flattened on one side, holding his pillow. Mom, he said, it is 3 a.m. I know, baby. Why are you still up? I am looking for something. Owen came into the office and looked at the documents spread across the desk. He looked at them the way he looked at architectural plans, with the focused attention of someone trying to understand a system. Did you find it? He asked. Not yet. Owen set his pillow on the floor and sat down against the wall. I'll wait, he said. Owen, go back to bed. I'll wait, he said again, with the calm finality of someone who has made a decision and is not going to be argued out of it. Nora looked at her son, 7 years old, sitting on the floor of her office at 3 in the morning with his pillow, waiting. Okay, she said. She turned the next page, and then the next. And then, at 3:47 in the morning, she found it. The document was in the 4th folder of the 7th year of filing. Not hidden. Nora had not hidden it because she had not known, at the time she filed it, that it would ever matter. It was a copy of the original partnership agreement, the one Derek and she had signed in the first month of the Café's operation, before the dissolution, before the expansion argument, before everything. She had filed it in chronological order, the way she filed everything, because she was the kind of person who believed that organization was a form of respect for your own history. She almost passed it. She was moving through the folder quickly, cross-referencing dates against the timeline Simone had built for the defense, when something stopped her. A date in the upper right corner of the document. She looked at it. Then she looked at the copy of the agreement Derek had submitted to the court which Patricia had sent her as part of the case file. She looked at both dates. She looked at them again. The document Derek had filed with the court was dated the 14th of March. The copy in her filing cabinet, the original, the one she had signed, the one with both their signatures and the notary stamp, was dated the 3rd of April, 3 weeks apart. The same document, the same signatures, 3 weeks apart. Nora set both papers on the desk side by side and looked at them with the focused stillness of someone who has just understood something important and is making absolutely certain they have understood it correctly before they say it out loud. The agreement Derek had filed with the court predated the agreement she had signed by 3 weeks, which meant that either she had signed a document before it existed, which was not possible, or Derek had altered the date on the copy he submitted to the court, which meant the document Derek had filed was not the document they had signed, which meant Derek had committed fraud. Owen, from his position on the floor, looked up. He had been half asleep against the wall, his pillow in his lap, but something in the quality of his mother's stillness had woken him the way that children are woken by the particular silence of a parent who has just made a discovery. "Mom," he said, "did you find it?" Nora looked at her son. "Yes," she said, "I found it." Owen stood up and came to the desk. He looked at the two documents side by side with the careful attention he gave to everything structural. He looked at the dates. He looked at his mother. "The numbers are different," he said. "Yes, same paper. Different numbers." "Yes." Owen looked at the documents for another moment. "He changed it," he said. "Not a question. That is what it looks like." Owen was quiet for a moment. Then he said, with the matter-of-fact certainty of someone who has been raised to believe that honesty is not optional. "That is wrong." "Yes," Nora said. "It is." "Adults are so strange," Owen said. "Why don't they just tell the truth? It is faster." "I genuinely don't know," Nora said. She picked up her phone. It was 3:47 in the morning. She typed a message to Simone. "I found it. The document Derek filed is dated 3 weeks before the one I signed. Same document, different date. He altered the filing copy. Call me when you are awake. This is fraud, not just a civil dispute." She sent it. Then she sat back in her chair and looked at the two documents on the desk. The recipe box was in the corner, her grandmother's handwriting visible through the clear lid. The kitchen beyond the office door smelled like the beginning of something. The faint yeast smell of the croissant dough that had been resting since midnight, getting ready for the morning. Her phone lit up on the desk. Not a text, a call. Simone at 3:51 in the morning. "I was awake," Simone said, before Nora could speak. "It is 4 in the morning. I told you I'd be awake. I don't sleep well before a major filing." A pause. "Tell me exactly what you found." Nora told her. She described both documents, both dates, the 3-week discrepancy. She heard Simone go quiet in the way that lawyers go quiet when they are processing something significant. "Nora," Simone said finally, "I know. This isn't just a defense anymore. This is a counterclaim. I know. If we can get forensic document analysis to confirm the alteration, and given the date discrepancy, that should be straightforward. Derek's entire case collapses. Not just weakens, collapses." Another pause. "And his attorney may have submitted a fraudulent document to the court without knowing it was fraudulent, which creates a whole separate set of problems for Hargrove's office." "I don't care about Hargrove's office," Nora said. "I care about the Café." "I know. But the judge is going to care about Hargrove's office." Simone's voice had taken on the particular energy of a lawyer who has just seen the path to victory open up in front of her. "Can you photograph both documents right now and send them to me?" "Already doing it." "Send them to Patricia, too. She needs to see this before the hearing." Nora photographed both documents carefully, making sure the dates were clearly visible, and sent them to Simone and Patricia. Then she looked at Owen, who had climbed back onto the floor and was sitting with his pillow, watching her with the patient attention of someone who had decided his presence was necessary, and was not going to apologize for it. "Go to bed," she said. "Are you okay?" he asked. "I am better than okay." Owen looked at her for a moment. Then he stood up, picked up his pillow, and walked to the office door. He stopped. "Mom," he said. "Yes." "Grandma Eileen would be proud." Nora looked at the recipe box in the corner, at the handwriting visible through the clear lid, at the words she had read 10,000 times and never gotten tired of. "Go to bed, baby," she said. "Good night," Owen said, and went. Nora sat alone in the office for a moment. Then she typed one more message, to Caleb, because it was almost 4 in the morning, and she had told him she needed space, and she also needed him to know, "I found it. I am okay. Talk soon." The response came in 30 seconds. "I am here whenever you are ready." She looked at the message. Then she looked at the 2 documents on the desk. Then she looked at the recipe box. She turned off the office light and went to check on the croissant dough. It was ready. The Chatham County Civil Courthouse on Broad Street was 3 blocks from the Café and 4 blocks from Caleb's building, a proximity that Nora had not thought about until she was standing on the courthouse steps at 8:45 in the morning watching the October light fall across the stone facade and thinking about the particular geography of the last 4 months. Patricia was already inside. Simone was beside Nora on the steps, reviewing notes on her phone with the focused efficiency of someone who had been awake since 4 in the morning, and was running entirely on professional adrenaline and the very good coffee she had picked up from the cafe on the way over. "Patricia filed the forensic analysis request last night," Simone said. "The preliminary results came back at 6 this morning. The date on Derek's filed copy was altered using a different ink formulation than the rest of the document. The paper stock is consistent, but the date was added after the original printing." "So it is confirmed," Nora said. "It is confirmed." Simone put her phone in her bag. Derek either did this himself or had someone do it for him. Either way, he submitted a fraudulent document to a civil court. That is not a civil matter anymore. Patricia mentioned a referral to the district attorney's office. Yes, that is standard when a court discovers document fraud. The judge will make the referral automatically once the analysis is entered into evidence. Simone looked at her. "How are you feeling?" "Ready," Nora said. "Good." Simone straightened her jacket. "Because your mother is already inside." Nora looked at the courthouse doors. "I know. She came in 20 minutes ago." She was alone. Derek's attorney was already there. Did she look? She looked like someone who was not entirely sure she had made the right decision, Simone said carefully, which is different from looking like someone who is certain she has. Nora nodded slowly. She had not spoken to her mother since the filing. Renata had called twice. Nora had let both calls go to voicemail and had listened to them late at night in the kitchen, her grandmother's recipe box on the counter beside her. The messages had been careful and slightly formal in the way that messages are when someone is trying to say something they have not yet figured out how to say. She had not called back. "Let's go in," Nora said. The courtroom was smaller than she had expected. Wood-paneled walls, fluorescent lighting that was slightly too bright, an American flag in the corner that had seen better days. The judge was already at the bench, a woman in her late 50s named the Honorable Catherine Marsh, who had the expression of someone who had heard a great many stories in this room and had developed a reliable instinct for which ones were true. Derek was at the plaintiff's table with his attorney, a man named Garrett from Hargrove's office, thin and precise, with the particular stillness of someone who was very good at waiting. Derek was wearing a suit that was slightly too new, the kind of suit you buy specifically for a court appearance, and he was sitting with the careful posture of someone who had been coached on how to sit. He looked at Nora when she came in. She looked back at him with the same expression she used when a supplier tried to renegotiate an agreed price, attentive, neutral, and entirely unmoved. In the gallery behind the plaintiff's table, Renata Callahan was sitting in the second row. She was wearing the blue coat she wore to important occasions, and she was holding her handbag in her lap with both hands, and she was looking at the space in front of her with the focused attention of someone who was not going to look at her daughter until she had decided what her expression should be. Caleb was in the gallery on Nora's side. He had not told her he was coming. He had simply appeared in the third row, in a dark jacket with his tie slightly loosened in the way it always was by mid-morning, and when Nora saw him he gave her a small nod that meant nothing in particular and everything in general. She turned back to the front of the room. The hearing began. Garrett opened for the plaintiff with the smooth confidence of someone who had prepared extensively, and was not yet aware that his preparation was built on a document that was about to be dismantled. He presented Derek's claim clearly and with apparent reasonableness. A founding partner who had contributed financially and operationally to a business that had since become successful, who had signed a dissolution agreement under conditions that his client characterized as coercive, who was now seeking only what he was rightfully owed. He was good. Nora had to acknowledge that. He made Derek sound like a reasonable man who had been treated unfairly by a difficult partner, and he did it without saying anything overtly false. He simply arranged the true facts in an order that suggested a story that was not true. Then Patricia stood up. "Your Honor," Patricia said, "the defense would like to begin by entering into evidence a forensic document analysis completed this morning by Dr. James Whitfield of the South Carolina Institute of Forensic Sciences." Garrett looked up from his notes. "This analysis," Patricia continued, "examines the partnership agreement submitted by the plaintiff as the basis for his claim. Specifically, it examines the date appearing in the upper right corner of that document." She paused. "The analysis confirms that the date on the plaintiff's filed copy was added to the document after its original printing, using a different ink formulation than the remainder of the text. The date on the plaintiff's copy reads the 14th of March. The original signed agreement, which the defense has in its possession, is dated the 3rd of April 3 weeks later." The courtroom was very quiet. Judge Marsh looked at the analysis. Then she looked at Garrett. "Counselor," she said, "are you aware of this discrepancy?" Garrett had gone very still. "Your Honor, my client provided this document as the original signed agreement. I had no reason to—" "I am asking if you were aware of the discrepancy," Judge Marsh said. Her tone had not changed. It did not need to. "No, Your Honor," Garrett said, "I was not." Judge Marsh looked at Derek. Derek was looking at the table in front of him with the expression of someone who has just understood that the situation has changed in a way that cannot be recovered from. "Mr. Collins," Judge Marsh said. Derek looked up. "Would you like to explain the date discrepancy on the document you submitted to this court?" Derek looked at Garrett. Garrett gave him a very small, very careful shake of the head. I am not sure how that happened," Derek said. "You are not sure," Judge Marsh said. "The document I gave my attorney was the one I had on file. I don't know how—" "Mr. Collins." Judge Marsh's voice was not loud. It did not need to be. "I have been on this bench for 19 years. I have seen a great many things in this room. I am going to give you one opportunity to think carefully about what you say next." The courtroom was completely silent. Derek looked at the table. Patricia, without changing her expression, placed the original signed agreement on the evidence table beside the forensic analysis. "Your Honor," she said, "the defense also submits the original signed agreement, dated the 3rd of April, with both parties' signatures and a notary stamp." Additionally, we submit financial records demonstrating that Mr. Collins's contribution to the startup costs of the Callahan totaled $15,000, representing approximately 12% of total startup capital, and that this contribution was fully returned to him at the time of dissolution, along with a goodwill payment representing a small percentage of first-year profits. The dissolution agreement was signed with both parties represented by independent legal counsel. Judge Marsh looked at the documents. She looked at them for a long time. Then she looked at the gallery. "I am going to call a brief recess," she said. 15 minutes. Mr. Garrett, I suggest you use that time to consult with your client about his options. She left the bench. The courtroom exhaled. Nora sat very still at the defense table. Beside her, Simone was writing something in her notepad with the focused calm of someone who was already drafting the next motion. Patricia was organizing her documents with the unhurried efficiency of someone who had expected this outcome and was now simply managing the paperwork. From across the room, Derek looked at Nora. She looked back at him. Not with triumph. She was too tired for triumph, and too relieved, and too aware of the recipe box sitting on the office desk 3 blocks away. She looked at him the way you look at something that was once important and is no longer, with the clear-eyed recognition of someone who has finished carrying a weight and set it down. Derek looked away first. In the gallery, Renata Callahan was sitting very still with her handbag in her lap and her eyes on the evidence table, where the original signed agreement, the one with both signatures, the one with the notary stamp, the one dated the 3rd of April, was sitting beside the forensic analysis that had just ended her former son-in-law's case. During the recess, Nora went to the hallway. She stood at the window and looked at Broad Street, the morning traffic, the people walking past with coffee, the ordinary Tuesday that was happening outside, while her life was being decided inside. Caleb came to stand beside her. "You found it yourself," he said. "Yes." "At 4 in the morning?" 3:47. He was quiet for a moment. "How did you know to keep looking?" "My grandmother wrote it on the croissant recipe," Nora said. "Patience is the ingredient nobody writes down." She looked at the street. "I've been reading that card since I was 12 years old. I figured it applied." Caleb looked at her. In the hallway light, with the morning coming through the window, she looked exactly like herself, tired and certain and completely undefeated. "Nora," he said. "Not yet," she said. "Let me finish this first." He nodded. "I'll be in the gallery." She watched him go back through the courtroom doors. Then she turned back to the window for one more moment. Then she went back in. When the hearing resumed, Garrett informed the court that his client wished to withdraw the claim. Judge Marsh looked at him over her glasses. "Mr. Garrett," she said, "I appreciate your client's change of heart. However, I want to be clear about what has occurred in this courtroom this morning." She looked at the forensic analysis on the evidence table. A document submitted to this court as an original signed agreement has been demonstrated to contain an altered date. This court is required to refer this matter to the district attorney's office for review of potential document fraud. Garrett nodded carefully. "We understand, Your Honor." "I am not certain you do," Judge Marsh said. "But you will." She looked at Nora. "Miss Callahan, the plaintiff's claim is dismissed with prejudice. The freeze on your business accounts will be lifted by end of business today. Your legal costs in this matter are to be borne by the plaintiff." She gathered her papers. "I am sorry. This was necessary." "Thank you, Your Honor," Nora said. Judge Marsh left the bench. Derek stood up from the plaintiff's table. He looked at Nora across the room with an expression that had moved through several things: anger, calculation, something that might have been shame, and had arrived at a kind of flat resignation. "Congratulations," he said. His voice was controlled. "You won?" I didn't win anything, Nora said. I kept what was already mine. Derek looked at her for a moment. Then he picked up his jacket and walked out. Garrett followed him, already on his phone, already managing the next problem. The courtroom emptied. Nora stood at the defense table for a moment after everyone else had moved. Simone was gathering documents. Patricia was speaking quietly with the court clerk. In the gallery, Caleb was still in his seat, waiting, and then Renata was beside her. Nora's mother was 61 years old and had the same dark eyes as her daughter and the same quality of stillness when she was deciding what to say. She was holding her handbag with both hands, and she was looking at Nora with an expression that was not the expression Nora had expected. It was not defensive. It was not the careful neutrality of someone who was going to explain their reasoning. It was something simpler and harder than either of those things. I should have called you back, Renata said. Nora looked at her. When you didn't answer my calls, I should have come to the Café. I should have come in person instead of leaving a voicemail. Renata looked at the evidence table where the original signed agreement was still sitting. I saw that document last night. Simone showed it to me. The dates. She stopped. I have been telling myself for 3 years that you were too stubborn to make the partnership work, that you pushed Derek away because you couldn't share something you loved. She paused. I was wrong. Mama, let me finish. Renata looked at her daughter. I was wrong about Derek. I was wrong to believe him when he said you pressured him. I was wrong to agree to come here and say things that would have hurt you. She stopped again. Her voice was very steady, which Nora knew meant she was working hard to keep it that way. Your grandmother built something in that kitchen for 50 years, and you took what she built and you made it into something she would have recognized. That is not stubbornness. That is exactly what she would have wanted. The courtroom was very quiet. It is going to take time, Nora said finally. I know. I am not. I can't just. I know, Renata said. I am not asking for immediately. I am asking for eventually. Nora looked at her mother. The blue coat, the handbag held with both hands, the expression that was trying very hard to be honest. Come to the café on Saturday, Nora said. We'll have breakfast. Renata nodded. Her eyes were bright in a way that she was not going to acknowledge. I'll be there before 9, she said. Before 9 is when the croissants are best, Nora said. I know, Renata said. Your grandmother taught me that. Outside on the courthouse steps, the October sun was doing the thing it did in Charleston in the fall. Warm and specific, the kind of light that makes everything look like it has been considered. Nora stood on the top step and breathed. Simone appeared beside her. It is over, she said. It is over, Nora agreed. Patricia is filing the cost recovery motion this afternoon. You should have Derek's legal fees reimbursed within 60 days. Simone paused. The DEA referral is going to be uncomfortable for him. That is his problem now, Nora said. Yes, Simone said. It is. She looked at Nora with the particular expression she reserved for moments when she was about to say something she had been holding back. You did this, she said. Not Patricia, not Caleb. You kept the records. You found the document. You walked into that courtroom, and you didn't flinch. I flinched a little, Nora said. On the inside. On the outside you were immovable. Simone put her arm around Nora's shoulders briefly. Your grandmother would have been insufferably proud. Owen said the same thing. Owen is 7 and correct. Simone picked up her bag. I have a deposition at 2. Call me tonight. She went down the steps. Nora stood alone for a moment. Then she heard footsteps behind her and knew, without turning, who it was. Caleb stood beside her on the top step. He did not say anything immediately. He looked at Broad Street, the traffic, the people, the ordinary Tuesday continuing to happen, and he let the silence be what it was, which was not empty. "Thank you for coming," Nora said. "I wasn't going to miss it. You could have told me you were coming. You said you needed space." "I said I needed space from the situation." "Not from you." She looked at him. "There is a difference." He looked at her. "I know that now." "Good." She looked back at the street. "I need coffee. Real coffee, not courthouse coffee, which tastes like a decision someone regrets." "The cafés," he said. "The café," she said. They walked the 3 blocks together through the October morning, and neither of them said anything. And it was exactly the right amount of words. The Café Twee was closed on Wednesday mornings, Nora's one standing concession to the concept of rest, which Owen had negotiated for her 2 years ago on the grounds that structural integrity required maintenance periods. And his mother was a structural element. But the pale blue door was unlocked when Caleb arrived at 7 the next morning, and the lights in the kitchen were on, and the smell coming through the door was the particular smell of the first batch of croissants, butter and warmth, and something that was not quite describable, but that Caleb had come to associate, over the past 4 weeks, with the specific feeling of arriving somewhere he wanted to be. He pushed the door open. Nora was behind the counter. She was not in her apron. She was wearing a dark sweater, and her hair was down, which was unusual enough that he noticed it immediately. She was making coffee with the focused attention she gave to everything, and she did not look up when he came in, but she reached for a second cup without being asked and set it on the counter beside the first. "You are early," she said. "You said 6:45. It is 6:38. I walked slowly. You live 20 minutes away. I walked very slowly." She looked up. There was something in her expression that was not quite a smile, but was the thing that came just before one, a quality of openness that he had learned to recognize as the version of Nora that existed when she had decided to stop being careful. "Sit down," she said. "The croissants need 4 more minutes." He sat at the counter, the second stool from the left, which Owen had designated as his and which felt, after 4 weeks, like the most natural place in the city to be. The coffee arrived in front of him. He wrapped his hands around the cup and looked at the recipe cards on the wall. The enlarged photographs of Eileen Callahan's handwriting, each one a different dish, each one in the same precise script. "How are you?" he asked. "Better," she said. "Genuinely better, not the version of better where you say it to make other people comfortable." She leaned against the counter. "The accounts are unfrozen." Patricia confirmed the cost recovery motion was filed. "Simone says the DA referral will move slowly, but it will move." She paused. "My mother is coming on Saturday." "How do you feel about that?" "Cautious," Nora said. "But willing." She looked at the recipe cards. "She said something in the courtroom about my grandmother. Something true." She was quiet for a moment. It is hard to stay angry at someone who says a true thing about someone you love. "It is," Caleb said. The oven timer went off, a soft mechanical sound from the kitchen, not loud, just present. Nora went to the oven and came back with a tray of croissants, golden and layered and slightly irregular in the way that handmade things are irregular. She put 3 on a plate and set it in front of him. "I don't eat pastry," he said. "I know," she said. He ate 2 croissants before he said anything else. They were, as always, extraordinary, the outer layers with their slight resistance, the interior almost creamy, the flavor simple and complete. He had stopped trying to explain why they were different from every other croissant he had ever eaten, and had accepted that some things were what they were because of who made them. "And why?" "Nora," he said. "Yes, I need to tell you something." She looked at him with a steady attention that was her most characteristic quality. Not waiting, not bracing, just present. "I spent the last 2 weeks, the weeks when you needed space, doing something I haven't done in 3 years. He looked at the coffee in his hands. I went to see Marcus. She was very still. Not, I went to the cemetery, he said. I hadn't been since the first year. I kept telling myself I would go and then finding reasons not to. He paused. I went on a Tuesday morning. I sat there for about an hour. I talked to him. What did you say? Nora asked. I told him about you, Caleb said. I told him about Owen and the ruler and the load-bearing walls. I told him about the croissants and the recipe cards and the pale blue door. He looked up. I told him I had found someone who made me want to show up, not to meetings, not to negotiations, just to the morning, to the ordinary Tuesday morning. He paused. He would have liked you. He would have liked Owen enormously. He would have spent the entire first meeting asking Owen about structural engineering, and Owen would have answered every question, and Marcus would have taken notes. Nora's eyes were bright. She was not going to cry. She had the quality of someone who had decided not to cry, and was going to honor that decision. But her eyes were bright. He sounds wonderful, she said. He was, Caleb said. He was the better version of me. Stop saying that. It is true. It is not true, she said. It is the story you've been telling yourself for 3 years because it is easier than the other story. She looked at him directly. The other story is that you were a person who made a mistake and lost someone and have been carrying it ever since. That is not a lesser version of anyone. That is just a person. Caleb looked at her. You are not the worse version of Marcus, she said. You are the version that is still here. That is not a consolation prize. That is the whole point. The kitchen was very quiet. From upstairs. Nora's apartment was above the caf. Connected by an internal staircase, came the sound of footsteps. Deliberate, unhurried, the footsteps of someone who was awake and had been for a while and was now descending at a pace that suggested he had things to do. Owen appeared in the kitchen doorway. He was wearing his school uniform already, backpack on, ruler in hand, with the expression of someone who had arrived at a scene he had been expecting. He looked at Caleb. He looked at his mother. He looked at the plate of croissants. Are you two done being complicated? He asked. We're working on it, Nora said. Good. Owen came to the counter and took a croissant from the plate with the casual authority of someone who lives here. Because I need a second opinion on something. He reached into his backpack and produced a large sheet of paper, which he unfolded on the counter with the practiced efficiency of someone who had been waiting for the right moment to present this. It was a hand-drawn architectural plan detailed. Careful, with measurements written in Owen's precise handwriting and structural notations that were, Caleb noticed, technically accurate. It was a plan for the second room of the caf, not a sketch. Plan, with load calculations and sightline measurements and a note in the corner that said Expansion Phase 1, Preliminary Design, Owen Callahan, age 7. Caleb looked at the plan for a long moment. He looked at the structural notations. He looked at the load calculations. He looked at the sightline measurements. This is actually very good, he said. Owen looked at him with the patient dignity of someone receiving a compliment they consider accurate but insufficient. I know, he said. I am 7, not 5. He pointed to a notation in the corner. This wall here, I've marked it as non-load-bearing, but I want to confirm that with someone who has professional credentials before we proceed. Nora said. The expansion, Owen said. It is a structural project. It requires a team. He looked at Caleb. Do you know any architects? I know several architects, Caleb said. Good ones. The best ones? Owen nodded, satisfied. Then you can be the liaison, he said. I'll be the lead designer. Mom will be the client. He picked up his croissant. We should schedule a planning meeting. Owen, Nora said. What? It is a structural necessity. He looked at Caleb. Tuesday works for me. Before school. Caleb looked at Nora. Nora was looking at her son with the expression that was not quite pride, and not quite wonder, but was somewhere between the two, and had been her most frequent expression since the day Owen was born. Tuesday, Caleb said. Before school. Owen nodded. Good. He folded the plan back into his backpack with precise efficiency. I am going to school. Don't be complicated while I am gone. He kissed his mother on the cheek and walked out the front door. The pale blue door closed behind him. Nora and Caleb looked at each other across the counter. He planned this, Nora said. He planned all of it, Caleb said. Probably from the night at the restaurant. He is 7. He is 7, and he has been 3 steps ahead of both of us since October. Caleb looked at the door. He is going to be extraordinary. He already is, Nora said. She looked at Caleb across the counter. The morning light was coming through the front windows now, falling across the pale wood and the recipe cards on the wall, and the plate of croissants between them. The café smelled like butter and coffee and the particular warmth of a kitchen that has been loved for a long time. Come for dinner tonight, she said. Upstairs. I'll cook. You cook all day, he said. I bake all day. Cooking is different. It is what I do when I want to. She picked up her coffee. 7 o'clock. Don't be early. 6:55, he said. 7, she said. 6:58. She looked at him. You are impossible. I know, he said. It is part of my charm. She almost smiled. Not quite, but almost. And then all the way. 1 month later, on a Friday evening in November, Caleb made a reservation at Hartwell's. Not one of the counter stools. Not a walk-in at 9 in the evening. With no plan and a granola bar's worth of optimism. A reservation made 3 weeks in advance for 3 people at table 7, which was the corner table with the view of the rest of the room and which had been on the night they met. The table that was perpetually reserved for parties that had not yet arrived. He had called ahead to speak with Marcus. The birthday gentleman, Marcus had said, when Caleb explained what he wanted. I wasn't a gentleman that night, Caleb said. I was a person who argued with your clipboard. You were persistent, Marcus said. There is a difference. A pause. Table 7. Friday, the 14th, 7 p.m. Party of 3. Another pause. Is this a special occasion? I hope so, Caleb said. Then I'll make sure it is ready, Marcus said. Nora wore a dark green dress that she had bought the previous week and had told Simone was for no particular reason, which Simone had accepted with the professional neutrality of someone who did not believe a word of it. Owen wore his good jacket and his second-best ruler. The first best was reserved for field work, and spent the walk from the parking garage to the restaurant narrating the architectural features of every building they passed, which was his standard mode of engagement with the built environment, and which Nora had long since stopped trying to redirect. Marcus was at the host stand. He saw them come in, and his face did something that was not quite a smile, and not quite recognition, but was both at once. The expression of someone who has been waiting for a particular story to arrive at its next chapter. Good evening, he said. Welcome back to Hartwell's. Thank you, Caleb said. We have a reservation. Of course. Marcus looked at his clipboard. The same clipboard, or one exactly like it, held with the same quiet authority. Whitmore, party of 3. Table 7. He looked at Nora. The lady who offered a seat. I offered a stool, Nora said. You offered more than that, Marcus said. But we can argue about it later, he smiled. A real one, not the professional version. Right, this way. Table 7 was in the corner with a view of the whole room. The bar in the center, the open kitchen at the back, the warm amber light that turned everything golden. It was set for 3, with candles and a small arrangement of late-season flowers that Marcus had clearly added specifically for this occasion. Owen looked at the table. He looked at the room. He looked at the structural elements of the ceiling with the focused attention of someone who could not turn this off, even at a nice restaurant. "The ceiling joists are original," he said. "1880s, probably. They've been reinforced but not replaced." "Good decision. Replacement would have changed the acoustic profile." "How do you know the acoustic profile is good?" Caleb asked. "Listen," Owen said. They listened. The restaurant was full conversations. The sound of the kitchen, the particular warmth of a room where people were having a good time, but it was not loud. The sound was distributed evenly, absorbed by the old wood and the high ceiling, creating a space that was lively without being overwhelming. "The original joists act as diffusers," Owen said. "Modern replacements would have been smoother, less diffusion, more echo." He sat down and picked up his menu. "Whoever renovated this space understood that." "I'll mention it to the owner," Caleb said. "Please do," Owen said. "It is worth acknowledging good structural decisions." They ordered. Nora had the duck, the same dish she had been studying the night they met, now ordered with the familiarity of someone who has done the research and arrived at a conclusion. Caleb had the steak, which he had been planning to eat on his birthday 6 weeks ago, and was only now getting around to. Owen had the pasta, which he inspected with his customary thoroughness before approving it. The meal was, by any measure, extraordinary. Not just the food, though the food was everything the reviews had promised, but the specific quality of the evening, the way the 3 of them occupied the table with the ease of people who had learned each other's rhythms and were no longer performing for each other. After the main course, Owen reached into his jacket pocket and produced a folded piece of paper. He unfolded it on the table with a careful precision he brought to everything, and turned it toward the center so both Nora and Caleb could see. It was a drawing. Crayon, on the same kind of paper the restaurant provided for children, though Owen had clearly brought his own because the restaurant's paper was not the right weight for his purposes. 3 figures at a table. On the left, a woman in a dark green dress, her hair down, leaning forward slightly, in the way that meant she was in the middle of saying something. On the right, a tall man in a jacket with his tie slightly loosened, with an expression that was not confused this time. The expression Owen had drawn was something quieter and more settled. The expression of someone who is exactly where he is supposed to be. In the middle, a smaller figure with a ruler in his pocket, sitting very straight with an expression of complete satisfaction. Underneath, in Owen's careful handwriting, official. Caleb looked at the drawing for a long time. He looked at the woman in the dark green dress, leaning forward. He looked at the tall man with the settled expression. He looked at the small figure in the middle with the ruler, and the look of complete satisfaction. "Owen," he said. "Yes." "Can I keep this?" Owen looked at him with the patient dignity of someone who has been waiting for exactly this question. "It is yours," he said. "I made it for you." "Why?" Owen shrugged with the casual certainty of a child who has already decided how the story ends. "Because you are going to need it later," he said. Nora looked at Owen. Then she looked at Caleb. Then she looked at Owen again, with the expression of someone who has just understood something. "Owen," she said carefully, "what do you mean he is going to need it later?" "For the wall," Owen said. He picked up his fork. "When you have a house, you'll want to put it on the wall. Primary source documents should be displayed, not stored." He ate a bite of pasta. "I've already thought about where it should go. Near the kitchen. Good light." "We don't have a house," Nora said. "Not yet," Owen said. Nora looked at Caleb. Caleb reached into his jacket pocket. He had been carrying the box for 3 weeks. He had taken it out and put it back approximately 40 times. He had asked Simone's opinion, which she had given at length and with great enthusiasm. He had asked Patricia's opinion, which she had given briefly and with great precision. He had asked Marcus, the host's opinion, during the reservation call, which Marcus had given with the philosophical warmth of someone who had been waiting for this particular story to reach this particular moment. He had not asked Owen's opinion because Owen had already given it, unprompted, 3 weeks ago, when he had looked at Caleb across the café counter and said, "You are going to want to remember tonight," and Caleb had understood, even then, that Owen was not talking about a single night, but about all the nights that were going to follow it. He set the box on the table. It was small and dark blue, and it sat between the candles and the late-season flowers and the drawing of the three of them at a table. Nora looked at the box. Then she looked at Caleb. "This is very fast," she said. "It has been 4 months," he said. "That is fast. Is it a no?" She looked at the box. She looked at Owen, who had set down his fork and was watching with the focused attention of someone who has been waiting for this scene, and intends to observe it properly. She looked at the drawing, the woman in the dark green dress, the tall man with the settled expression, the small figure in the middle, with the ruler and the look of complete satisfaction. She looked at Caleb. "It is a not yet," she said. Something in his expression shifted. Not disappointment, but a kind of recognition. "Tell me what not yet means," he said. "It means ask me again at the café," she said. "On a Tuesday, before 9, with terrible coffee, not the café's coffee, which is excellent, but the kind of terrible coffee that means you planned something and you were nervous and you stopped at the first place you passed." She paused. "And bring Owen something from the bakery on the corner of King Street, the one he pretends not to like but always eats." "The almond croissants," Owen said, without looking up. "I don't pretend not to like them. I have a complicated relationship with them." "He has a complicated relationship with them," Nora confirmed. Caleb looked at her. "A Tuesday," he said, "before 9. Terrible coffee. Almond croissants. Yes. How many Tuesdays?" "However many it takes for you to find the right one." She looked at him with the steady, open attention that was her most characteristic quality. "Not waiting, not performing, just present. I am not saying no. I am saying ask me when it is a Tuesday morning and the croissants are in the oven, and Owen is doing homework at the corner table and it smells like the beginning of something." She paused. "Ask me, then." Caleb put the box back in his pocket. Owen picked up his fork. "Good," Owen said. "Now we can have dessert." 6 weeks later, on a Tuesday morning in the second week of December, Caleb stopped at the gas station on the corner of Meeting Street and bought the worst coffee available. It came in a paper cup with a plastic lid, and it was the color of something that had been sitting on a burner since approximately the previous administration. He held it in his hand in the parking lot for a moment and considered it. It smelled like a decision someone had made without thinking it through. It was perfect. He also stopped at the bakery on the corner of King Street, the one Owen had a complicated relationship with, and bought 4 almond croissants, because Owen had mentioned once that the structural integrity of the almond filling was better when they were fresh, and Caleb had been paying attention. He arrived at the pale blue door at 6:42 in the morning. The lights were on inside. Through the front window he could see the warm glow of the kitchen, the recipe cards on the wall, the counter with its 4 stools. He could see Owen at the corner table, already at his homework, already with his ruler, already in his school uniform, with his backpack. On the back of his chair he pushed the door open. The smell hit him first, butter and coffee, and the particular warmth of a kitchen that has been loved for a long time, and underneath it, faint and sweet, the smell of almond croissants from the oven that meant the first batch was almost ready. Owen looked up from his homework. He looked at the paper cup in Caleb's left hand. He looked at the bakery bag in Caleb's right hand. He looked at Caleb's face. He put down his pencil. "Mom," Owen called toward the kitchen. "He is here." From the kitchen, Nora's voice. "I know. I heard the door. He brought the terrible coffee." A pause. "I know. And the almond croissants from the corner bakery?" A longer pause. "I know, Owen." Owen looked at Caleb with the expression of someone who has been waiting for this Tuesday for 6 weeks and is very pleased that it has finally arrived. He stood up from his chair and walked to the corner of the room and began, with great deliberateness, to do something with the construction. Paper decorations that Caleb now noticed were strung along the top of the window, small flags in green and gold, the kind that Owen made when he wanted to mark an occasion as structurally significant. "You decorated," Caleb said. "It is a notable occasion," Owen said. "Notable occasions require visual markers." He adjusted a flag. "I've been planning this for 3 weeks." 3 weeks? "I knew which Tuesday it would be," Owen said. "I calculated it based on available data." He looked at Caleb. "You've been carrying the box for 6 weeks. The probability of a Tuesday in December was highest based on your behavioral patterns and the AFI's operational schedule." He straightened the last flag. "I was right." "You were right," Caleb said. "I usually am," Owen said. He went back to his table and sat down and picked up his pencil. "Go to the kitchen," he said. "She is waiting." Caleb went to the kitchen. Nora was at the counter, her back to the door, doing something with the laminated dough that required a rolling pin and the focused attention she gave to everything. She was in her apron, her hair pinned up with the pencil, flour on her left sleeve. Of course there was flour on her left sleeve. She did not turn around when he came in. "You bought the terrible coffee," she said, "from the gas station on Meeting Street. How bad is it?" "Catastrophic." "Good." She kept working the dough. "Did you get the almond croissants?" "4 of them." Owen said the structural integrity of the filling is better when they're fresh. He is not wrong. She set down the rolling pin. She turned around. She looked at him the way she had looked at him on the courthouse steps, tired and certain and completely undefeated. Except that this morning she was not tired. This morning she was simply certain. "Caleb," she said. "Nora," he said. "It is a Tuesday." "It is. Before 9. 6:42. You have terrible coffee. Catastrophic coffee. And almond croissants. 4 of them." She looked at him for a long moment. The kitchen was warm around them. The oven held the first batch of croissants, almost ready. The recipe cards were in the wooden box on the corner of the desk in the office, and the enlarged photographs of Eileen Callahan's handwriting were on the wall in the front room, and Owen was at the corner table with his ruler and his homework and his construction paper flags. Caleb reached into his jacket pocket. He did not have a speech. He had thought about a speech, and had written 3 versions of one, and had deleted all of them because they were not right. They were the version of the speech that sounded like something someone said in a situation like this. And this was not a situation like anything. This was specific. This was a Tuesday morning in December in a kitchen that smelled like butter and almond and the beginning of something, with a woman who had offered him a stool when he had nowhere to sit and had been, in every way that mattered, exactly where he needed to be ever since. "I used to think that showing up late cost you everything," he said. "I spent 3 years believing that. I missed my brother's birthday, and I thought that was the lesson, that if you are not there at the right moment, you lose it forever." He looked at her. "But I think I had it wrong. I think sometimes you show up at exactly the right moment without knowing it is the right moment. I think sometimes the universe has a very specific sense of humor, and it puts you in a restaurant with no reservation on your birthday, and a woman offers you a stool, and her son asks you if you know what a cantilever is, and you guess correctly, and everything changes. Nora's eyes were bright. "I am not going to be late any more," he said. "Not for the things that matter. Not for Tuesday mornings. Not for the first batch of croissants. Not for you." He opened the box. "Nora Callahan. Will you?" "Yes," she said. "I didn't finish." "You didn't need to." She looked at the ring. Then she looked at him. "Yes." From the front room a sound, not loud, just present, of a 7-year-old who had been listening very carefully and had just received the confirmation he had been waiting for. Then the sound of a chair scraping back. Then Owen appeared in the kitchen doorway, still holding his pencil, with the expression of complete satisfaction that he had drawn on the figure in the middle of the crayon drawing 6 weeks ago. "Finally," he said. "Owen," Nora said. "What?" "I've been waiting since October." He looked at Caleb. "You are officially out of the testing phase." "When did that happen?" Caleb asked. "The night at the restaurant," Owen said, "when you knew what a cantilever was." "I guessed." "I know," Owen said, "but you tried. That is the whole test." He looked at his mother. "Can I have an almond croissant now?" "I thought you had a complicated relationship with them," Nora said. "I am working through it," Owen said. "This seems like a good occasion to make progress." From the front room came the sound of the door opening. Simone, who had been texted by Owen at 6:45, with the message it is today, come now, and who had arrived in under 15 minutes with champagne that she had apparently been keeping in her car for 2 weeks in preparation for exactly this morning. Behind her, Renata, who had been coming to the café every Saturday since the courthouse steps and who had been texted by Owen at 6:46 with the message, "Bring tissues," and who was already crying into a handkerchief before she had fully come through the door. "I told you to bring tissues," Owen said to his grandmother with the satisfaction of someone whose advice has been vindicated. "I brought tissues," Renata said, producing the handkerchief. "That is one tissue." "I said tissues. Plural." "Owen," Nora said. "It is a structural observation," Owen said. "One tissue is insufficient for this occasion." He looked at his grandmother. "There are paper napkins on the counter." Renata laughed, a real laugh, the kind that arrived before she could decide whether to let it, and came into the kitchen and put her arms around her daughter. Simone popped the champagne. The oven timer went off soft and mechanical, just present, and the kitchen filled with the smell of the first batch of croissants, golden and layered and ready. Owen got his almond croissant. He ate it at the corner table, under the construction paper flags, with his ruler in his pocket and his homework open in front of him, with the expression of someone who has been 3 steps ahead of everyone in the room since October and is very pleased with how the plan has come together. 1 year later, on a Tuesday morning in December, the second room of the Callahan opened. It had taken 11 months from Owen's preliminary design to the finished space, 11 months of planning meetings and structural consultations, and one memorable afternoon when Owen had explained load-bearing wall theory to a licensed architect for 45 minutes, and the architect had, at the end, said that the 7-year-old's instincts were correct and that he would have made the same structural decisions. Owen had accepted this with the dignity of someone receiving a compliment they consider accurate. The new room was connected to the original café by an archway that Owen had specified should be rounded rather than squared, better acoustic diffusion, he had explained, and also more structurally honest, because a rounded arch distributes load more efficiently, and there was no reason to pretend otherwise. The walls were the same pale brick as the original room. The lighting was warm and specific, designed to fall across the tables in a way that made everything look considered. Near the entrance to the new room, at eye level, there was a small plaque. It was simple, pale wood, clean lettering, the kind of thing that was easy to miss if you were not looking for it, and impossible to forget once you had seen it. For Eileen Callahan, who wrote everything down. Nora had put it there on the morning before the opening, before anyone else arrived. Standing alone in the new room with the wooden recipe box under her arm. She had looked at the plaque for a long time. Then she had gone back to the kitchen and started the first batch of croissants. The opening was on a Tuesday, which Owen had specified as the correct day on the grounds that Tuesday was the most honest day of the week. Not the beginning, not the end, not the end. Just Tuesday, present and specific and exactly what it was. Simone came with champagne, which was becoming a pattern. Renata came with a dish she had made from one of Eileen's recipes. The almond tart which she had learned from her mother-in-law 40 years ago and had not made since Eileen died, and which she set on the counter without ceremony and which tasted, when Nora tried it, exactly like the version she had been making from the recipe card. You remembered it, Nora said. I always remembered it, Renata said. I just needed a reason to make it again. Owen gave a brief presentation on the structural decisions that had informed the new room's design, using a pointer and a diagram he had prepared specifically for the occasion. The audience, Nora, Caleb, Simone, Renata, Patricia, Marcus the host who had been invited, because Owen had decided he was a structural element of the story and should be present, listened with the attentiveness of people who had learned that Owen's presentations were worth paying attention to. The rounded arch, Owen said, pointing to the archway between the rooms, distributes load across the full curve rather than concentrating it at the corners. This is more efficient and also more honest because it shows you exactly what the structure is doing rather than hiding it behind a squared frame. He looked at his audience. I think buildings should be honest about what they're doing. I think most things should be honest about what they're doing. He looked at Caleb when he said this. Caleb looked back at him. Agreed, Caleb said. Owen nodded, satisfied, and concluded his presentation. Later, after the guests had gone and Owen was upstairs doing homework and the cafe was quiet in the way it was quiet at the end of a good day, full of the residue of people who had been there and food that had been made and conversations that had happened, Nora found Caleb standing at the window of the new room, looking at the street. The side street was lit by the lamp-posts, the same golden light that had been there since before either of them was born, falling on the brick sidewalk in the same circles it had always fallen in. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "About the night I couldn't get a table," he said. She stood beside him. Regrets? He turned to look at her. The new room was warm around them. Through the archway, the rounded arch, honest about what it was doing. She could see the original Café, the counter with its 4 stools, the recipe cards on the wall in her grandmother's handwriting, a corner table where Owen had been doing homework since he was old enough to have homework. "None," he said. "You?" She looked at the room, at the plaque near the entrance, at the archway, at the recipe cards visible through it. "Not one," she said. He put his arm around her. She leaned into him the way you lean into something that has become, over the course of a year of Tuesday mornings and terrible gas-station coffee, and almond croissants, and a small figure with a ruler who had been 3 steps ahead of both of them since October, simply where you belong. From upstairs, Owen's voice drifted down through the ceiling. "Mom, the structural report for the second phase of the expansion is on the kitchen table. I need you to review it before Thursday." Nora looked at the ceiling. "Owen, it is 8 in the evening. Thursday is in 2 days. That is not a lot of review time. We'll look at it tomorrow." "Before 9, Owen said. "The morning light is better for reviewing structural documents." "Before 9, Nora agreed. Caleb looked at her. "Second phase," he said. "He has been planning it for 6 months," she said. "What does it involve?" "A rooftop terrace," she said. "He has opinions about the load calculations." "Of course he does. He also has opinions about the acoustic profile of the railing system." "Naturally. And the sightline to the harbor." 1.4 miles, Caleb said. "No obstructions." Nora looked at him. "You remembered." "I remember everything he tells me," Caleb said. "He is the most interesting person I know." "He is 8," Nora said. "He has been 8 for a while," Caleb said. "He came out of the womb, paying attention." Nora laughed, a real laugh. The kind that arrived before she could decide whether to let it, the kind she had been giving more freely for the past year, the kind that started somewhere in the chest and arrived without warning. Caleb watched her laugh and thought about a Friday night in October when he had walked into a restaurant with no reservation and a granola bar's worth of optimism, and a woman with flour on her sleeve had offered him a stool, and her son had asked him if he knew what a cantilever was, and he had guessed correctly and everything had changed. He thought about Marcus, who would have taken notes. He thought about patience being the ingredient nobody writes down. He thought about the fact that he had arrived, finally, at the place he was supposed to be, not because he had planned it or negotiated it or found it through any of the strategies that had made him successful in every other area of his life, but because on a particular Friday evening he had walked through a particular door and a particular woman had looked up from her menu and said, "Sit down before I change my mind." He had not waited for a second invitation. He never would again. Somewhere in Charleston, on a side street off King Street, there is a case-fee with a pale blue door. It opens at 6:45 in the morning, which is when the first batch of croissants comes out of the oven, and the smell that comes through the door when it opens is butter and coffee and something warm with vanilla that is not quite describable, but that people who have been there once tend to come back for. On the wall inside, there are recipe cards in an old-fashioned handwriting, precise and slightly formal, each letter formed with the care of someone who understood that handwriting was worth doing well. They belong to a woman named Eileen Callahan, who cooked in this city for 50 years and wrote everything down when she was 63, because she understood that things do not last forever, and some things are worth preserving. Near the entrance to the second room there is a small plaque that says, "For Eileen Callahan," who wrote everything down. At the corner table there is usually a boy with a ruler and a notebook doing homework or reviewing structural plans or explaining load-bearing wall theory to whoever is willing to listen, which is more people than you might expect. At the counter there are 4 stools. The second from the left has been informally reserved for the past year by a system involving a ruler as a placeholder, which the boy considers a structural necessity, and his mother considers a decoration, and his father considers both. And on Tuesday mornings before 9, when the croissants are in the oven and the city is just beginning to wake up and the light is coming through the front windows in the particular way that October light comes through windows in Charleston, warm and specific and worth paying attention to, there is a man at the counter with a paper cup of terrible gas station coffee, because some rituals, once established, are worth maintaining. He is always there, before 6:45. He is never late for the things that matter. And the woman behind the counter, with flour on her left sleeve and a pencil in her hair, always slides him a real coffee without being asked, because the terrible coffee is the ritual, and the real coffee is the truth, and she has always known the difference. What did you think of this story? Share your thoughts in the comments. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What score would you give it? Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to keep up with all our stories. And don't forget to check out more heartwarming stories right here on the end.